Sort of coming chapter 1009. As soon as Jingzhi passes, Do refers to Ding, the spring equinox is approaching, Do refers to Ren. The courtyard is quiet, and the wind dissolves and melts the moon. The ghost in red dress, called Miss Shui by the Taoist priests, put on a simple and elegant white dress tonight and came here to enjoy the flowers. After all, female ghosts are also women, and there are so many underwear and skirts in the house that they are full of big boxes. But she is just as self-respect, and it has nothing to do with the kind of woman who pleases herself. After all, that middle-aged Taoist priest, in terms of appearance, is really not good enough, and he is a mediocre man who can't come out of money and can't stand it. The walls are full of flowers, and there is a swing in the courtyard. She sat on the wooden board, tugging at the rope with both hands, and then hanging on the ground with her toes, a swing gently swayed. In fact, before the Taoist monks moved in, the house had long been deserted, overgrown with weeds and snakes and rats. Today, everything is orderly, with flowers blooming in the courtyard, and the splendor is vying for glory. The middle-aged Taoist priest, who was the biggest hero, was squatting at the top of the steps, holding a white bowl filled with some kind of herbal juice in one hand, and a wooden brush in the other, wiping his teeth there, occasionally raising his head, his throat gurgling. Ring, spit out the water again, and wash the teeth again. She asked, it's just a soup made from dandelion, used to wash your teeth. Is it really as mysterious as you say? Can it help people stabilize their teeth and strengthen their bones? Dandelions are like weeds, also known as huanghuolang. They grow at will in the gaps between stone and bricks. It seems that it is not uncommon to describe this thing in the collection of flower sketches and picture albums under the sky. What are you doing to deceive you? Do you have any money to make? The Taoist priest had just raised his head to take a sip of water, and now he nodded vigorously, and said vaguely, if it is made into a kind of elixir of immortal family on the mountain, the old man with white beard and hair can take it, and his hair will turn white and black. The teeth are regenerated, young and strong men eat it. It is even more amazing, the effect is excellent, like Zhang Ho, although he is a teenager, but often stays up all night reading with the light on, taking this pill. The eyes and ears are clear, and the muscles and bones are strong. It is completely out of the question. Shui Rui smiled and said, what a coincidence, the Taoist priest happened to have such a bottle of secret elixir on hand, right? The price is not cheap, but acquaintances can get a 50% discount. No, how can there be such a coincidence in the world? The Taoist priest tilted his head and spat out a sip of water, placed the wooden brush in the white bowl, put it at his feet, shook his head and said, Miss Shui, do you still remember the porridge and vegetables from a few days ago? She also said that it was fresh and delicious. Ask Pindao if it is what kind of vegetables are here, but Pindao sold it at a time, and deliberately didn't say it. In fact, it is the early spring leaf seedlings of this dandelion. Just put it in a pot and cook it, and then mix it with Pindo's secret hot sauce and sesame oil. Take it. Come and eat white rice porridge, the mountains and seas are incomparable. Shui Rui nodded. In the matter of rewarding the 5 Zong temples, the Taoist priest was very good at it, and he didn't spend much money. The Taoist priest asked tentatively, if Miss Shui is sincere, I can make a pot of medicinal herbs according to the prescription. Zhang Ho wants to pass the academy exam. Recently, I have been studying too hard, so I need to make up for it. It will take a while, dandelion will get old, and the effect of the medicinal pill will not be so good. Shui Rui rolled her eyes and walked around in such a big circle. Don't you want to cheat money from my pocket? Without the need for others to push, a swing swings on its own, high and low. She looks at the high and low flowers and plants. Vaguely remembered many years ago, the red wall and yellow plum, it was very beautiful. According to this Taoist priest, a person is lucky enough to be born in a prosperous world, and he can forget all his worries. If he is proficient in the art of planting flowers and plants, it is like spring in all seasons, which can teach people not to know that old age is coming. Therefore, a courtyard is well organized, whether it is planted on the ground or in pots, with lush flowers and plants, fragrant, and different flower species bloom in sequence, either thick but not demonic or light but not cold. In the courtyard of the house, there are as many as 7 or 8 kinds of flowers that the Taoist priests use as pots to welcome the spring. In addition to the pine, bamboo, and plum, there are also several pots of flowers that the Taoist priests call the Master of the Spring. A few words are beautifully said, but in fact, they were taken out by Taoist priests to sell for money. For example, there is a pot of old flowers that I don't know where the scholar brought them. The branches are as thick as a woman's arm, some of them have peeled off the skin, and the old roots protrude like dragon claws. Even if it's just a layman, Shui Rui knows about this bonsai and doesn't have to worry about high-priced buyers. The few books of peony, which the Taoist priests called spring flowers of the palace, were planted in the sunny place. When the weather was cold, the Taoist priests also specially covered them with straw. After the spring of this year, the Taoist priests will water them every day, and they will germinate. Before, he had specially watered manure to fertilize once, and Shui Rui frowned. Shui Rui glanced at the few flower pots neatly placed in the corner of the wall. Many bonsai came and went in the courtyard, probably all of them were replaced with pieces of broken silver, but this flower was not touched after it appeared. It may be that the Taoist priest liked it very much, and of course it was more likely that it could not sell for a good price. Just don't sell it. She stretched out her finger and asked, "Which pots of golden belts do you love the most?" This flower has a more popular name, jasmine. The Taoist priest raised his head and glanced at the corner of the wall, nodded and said, "Piandao is like a famous commander and soldier, the more the better, the more you will come. This flower is the first to welcome the spring, and it can bloom before the plum blossom, and it blooms more and lasts for a long time. So Pindao likes this flower the most, there is no one." She asked absently, "Wu Di, what is your real name?" The middle-aged Taoist smiled and said, "Chen Jianxian." Seeing the view, the sage is sage. She was taken aback. Is she so frank? The Taoist suggested sincerely, "Miss Shui can call me by my full name in the future. Recite the name twice, Chen Jianxian, Chen Jianxian." Shui Rui finally sighed, "If a dog can't spit out ivory, there's no truth to it. Wu Di, invincible. Chen Jianxian, Chen Jianxian." The middle-aged Taoist smiled and said, "Okay, why are you scolding people? Pindao is old now, and he is good at self-cultivation, so when Pindao was young and vigorous, he had to talk to you, especially it's the youthful years of jealousy, huh? A veritable liar." Shui Rui was too lazy to answer this question and asked, "I haven't asked, what are you doing here in the capital?" "Reminiscing." "Reminiscing the old." "Who to look for?" "Relatives, distant relatives. Or friends you know in the arena. You can't get along well outside, and plan to find friends on the road to eat and eat together, and partner to deceive people?" The Taoist priest who called himself Chen Jianxian shook his head and smiled, "None of them." Shui Rui suddenly became interested, and joked, "It's not always looking for revenge, right?" She turned her head and glanced at the Taoist priest, maybe because she thought this statement was too interesting, she couldn't help laughing, and laughed to herself, "It's just you? Even me can't scare me, I really want to talk to people. Provocation and fight. How many young men have you beaten?" The Taoist said with a smile, "Did you not see that I practice boxing and walking every morning and night? There is no need for immortality at all. It's not a problem to hit 2 or 3 young and strong men with my bare hands." She rolled her eyes, and just walked back and forth a few steps. There are dozens of martial arts gyms in the capital. It is estimated that any martial arts style can knock you down. Let's talk about it, if it's really looking for revenge, I can help you make plans. Maybe there will be a murder case, and I can help you cover your escape. She's also a great watcher. The Taoist priest shook his head and said, Miss Shui, stop guessing, it's just reminiscing about the old days. It's not the actions of a good and innocent person like me who is making a fuss. If he hadn't known about a certain long-term plan of the Ma family in advance, he would definitely have come to Yexuangguo earlier to reminisce. Of course, it was meaningless for the two sides to meet earlier, and it is very likely that they would not be able to seek revenge, but instead they would be cut down by the enemy. After escorting Li Baoping and the others to the Great Sui Academy, the first time they traveled south to Bay of Pingzu, they met Ma Kushuan in a foreign land and had a fight. The world is unpredictable, and I never thought that the second time I traveled to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, I would stay there for so long. After successfully returning to the vast world, starting a sect, building a sect, borrowing the mountains and rivers to make up for the lack of land, and going to the outside world to practice swords. Shui Rui said for no reason, dogs that bite people never bark. I think a person like you looks like a piece of soft dough, but if you get ruthless, you will be extremely ruthless. The Taoist looked calm and smiled. The world's joys and sorrows, love and hatred, all are like slowly brewing wine. Only when you open the mud seal and drink, you must be happy, and it must be booze. Shui Rui turned her head, it's scary. The Taoist smiled and said, there are no people who are not afraid of the sky and the earth. She had no reason to remember that there were officials in the nearby county government office, there were loan sharks in private, and they sold illicit salt at the same time. Of course, officials would not do it in person. The backer of the backer seems to be a servant of the Ministry of Punishment. As for who the backer of the servant is, she does not know, Lord Shangshu. His Majesty the Emperor. Or a certain immortal who has successfully cultivated Taoism on the mountain. Shui Rui asked, you said that they are all so rich, why don't they know how to stop it? After earning money that can't be spent in several lifetimes, the family has piled up a mountain of silver, right? Chen Pingan smiled and said, there are so many so-called ice-cutting houses, if they don't behave like this, they are dedicated to scavenging people's fat, they are busy knocking on their bones every day, and they have no taboos in dealing with the world. Yes. There's a sequence hidden here, but it's actually not complicated. Shui Rui choked for a while. Talking to him and chatting is fine, but as long as the truth is involved, it's boring. In the past, this Taoist priest would also follow many people to the frozen river, chisel the ice and sell it for money, as if he was willing to touch any business that could make money, such as bonsai, he was very good at it. She remembered that not long after the Taoist priest came to the house, she could roughly see the character of the other party. No matter how obsessed he was with money, he only said that in the matter of men and women, he was indeed a decent gentleman. So before, she used to tease this serious man like a Taoist. As a result, one day the Taoist made her sick with just one sentence. After that, she no longer wanted to tease the Taoist. She was sitting on this swing at the time, and the middle-aged Taoist priest was also sitting on the steps behind him, turning his head and smilingly asked Wu Di if he was looking at her ass. In fact, before that, Taoist priests would pretend not to hear some of her nasty words and never speak up. It was estimated that she was really annoying, so the Taoist priest said, I'm bigger, can I pull a few more pounds of shit? Vulgar. Dirty. Shui Rui sighed for no reason, flowers and plants fall. Whether it is a cultivator or a ghost, there is no difference between seeing life, old age, sickness and death under the mountain, and ordinary masters watching the flowers blooming and falling in this courtyard. She turned her head and asked, how did you become a Qi practitioner? The Taoist smiled and said, by chance, I learned mountain climbing when I was young. She turned her head and said softly, you are a smart person. You must have guessed it. As a ghost, the reason why I can live here for a long time must be something I rely on. The Taoist nodded, understanding it very well. It was not difficult to guess, there is someone above. On the side of the city god temple in the capital, there was a high-ranking civil judge, who seemed to be old acquaintances with her during their respective lifetimes. The judge had visited the mansion twice and met her. However, it is a bit like a private visit in a microservice, and there is no fanfare. Yin and Yang each have their own official offices. As the capital city of Yushuan, there are 24 divisions set up as usual. As the right-hand man of the Lord of the City God, this civil judge rules over 6 divisions, including the head of the divisions, the Yin and Yang division. But this is the old yellow calendar that has been turned over. Now, it's hard to say. As long as it is in the officialdom, no matter the level of knowledge and ability, regardless of the world and the underworld, you are afraid of being a little bit out of society. Shui Rui suddenly turned her head, her face was frosty and full of suffocation. The Taoist said helplessly, "Miss Shui, you are all serious people, what are you thinking? Let's just say, read less novels by talented and beautiful women, and read more classics and commentaries." Shui Rui said angrily, "Then you know what I'm thinking." The Taoist priest said, "If you want to add sin, there is no excuse." Seeing that the female ghost still looked ugly, the Taoist priest had to explain, "You say that the poor are greedy for money, but lustful? Miss Shui, you can't trust the character of the poor, but you can't help but believe in your own eyesight." Shui Rui felt that this statement was reasonable. The Taoist priest asked curiously, "Can you take the liberty to ask, where is the backing of Miss Shui and the officialdom? How big an official must be? In order for Miss Shui to settle down a few steps away from the county government office, there is no one on the county seat. Any ghost official will come to the door." Shui Rui sneered and said, "I'm good friends with the shackled general of the temple of the county god, are you afraid?" The Taoist secretly swallowed his saliva and stood up. Chao Na County Town God Temple clasped his fists in the distance, shook it vigorously a few times, and said solemnly, "Poor Dao is dedicated to cultivation, has a righteousness, and is never afraid of walking at night. Not to mention the Shackles General, who is in charge of punishing traitors and eliminating evil. The most impartial law enforcement, especially the Shackled Generals of our county, and the 7th and 8th Masters, are well-known officials." If Pindao could speak at the temple of the city god, he would have suggested that these 3 adults should be promoted. Reused. Shui Rui rubbed her brows. "You can't even listen to you. This place is no better than other places, and the county doesn't care. Chen Jianxian, don't you have a woman you like? Otherwise, it would be so homeless." "Yes, why not?" "Really?" Shui Rui knew that the other party was a genuine Qi trainer, although the realm was not worth mentioning, 2 realms. If you die, you are a 3-level Qi trainer. But after all, 1 foot stepped on the mountain. She joked, "Which girl, how old are you, is it your age, or a young woman? The other party is obsessed with you, so he will look at you. When you are middle-aged, everything will stop, you say you are so old." Now, there are more than 40 people, and nothing has been accomplished, relying on a sex private messenger to sway all day long. Find a chance to bring it over and show it to me. Oh, I have to split you up, so as not to harm others. In fact, this Taoist priest set up a stall every day for fortune-telling, and made a lot of money. Compared with the ordinary small households in the capital, it was still better. It's just that as a Qi trainer, it's not enough. Just like this every day, how many years can you earn a snow money? Chen Pingan smiled, "Then you can't break it up." Shui Rui turned her head and jokingly said, "The woman who can like you doesn't look very good, doesn't she?" The middle-aged man sitting on the steps laughed it off, just put his arms around his chest, looked up at the moon, and his eyes were gentle. Shui Rui pouted. "Ouch, sour. Maybe the man behind him is useless, maybe the woman who is thinking about her is really ordinary, but they are in love with each other. A man's mouth, a deceitful ghost, rhetoric. But eyes can't deceive people. The Taoist priest took out a vermilion wine gourd, an old object with a glossy pulp. Shui Rui smelled the aroma of the wine and couldn't help but ask, which wine is so fragrant? The Taoist said with a smile, the wine brewed at home is naturally delicious. It is recognized that it is cheap and high quality, but you have to drink it sparingly. Shui Rui simply got up and stood on the swing. I remember when the middle-aged Taoist priest first moved to the house, a swing was left unattended, and there was a series of silver bell-like laughter. The Taoist priest was so frightened that he immediately grabbed a stack of talismans from his sleeves, his wrists were trembling, he took out the fire book, and after igniting the talisman, he held it high, stepped on the bucket, and swayed around. Running away, shouting some mantras and incantations from an unknown Taoist lineage, slamming the door of the house, moving very fast, crackling, and plastering the door, walls and windows with worthless yellow paper talismans. The Taoist priest looked at the back standing on the swing, sighed, lifted the wine gourd in his hand, and took a sip of wine silently. The specious scene is also a swing in the wall outside the wall. Shui Rui joked, by the way, who are you looking for to reminisce? You have been in the capital for so long, and you haven't seen each other. It's so difficult to meet each other, is it His Majesty the Emperor? The Taoist priest seemed reluctant to mention this and changed the subject, in a few days, it will be the spring equinox. Miss Shui should pay more attention. From the time of the day to the spring equinox, it is just right that the yin and yang phase are half, day and night are equal, and the cold and summer are flat, the thinning of the yin and yang phase is thunder, and the excitement is electricity. For the ghosts in the world, it is a relatively difficult time after the Zhijing and before the Qingming festival, especially after the spring equinox, when the yang qi gradually rises to attack the yin, and thunder occurs. Shui Rui obviously didn't care. Although she was a female ghost, she belonged to a virtuous creature who had successfully cultivated the Tao. The middle-aged Taoist just mentioned it casually, rubbed his hands and said, on the spring equinox, I will show my hands again, and set up a table for you to eat spring vegetables, bamboo shoots, green wormwood, spring buds. Pindao travels south and north, go to after the spring equinox, there are peach blossoms near Keiguo. The mandarin fish and crucian carp in the river, steamed and braised, are all delicious. Further south, near the sea, if it is this season, come to a large plate of fried yellow sand clams. Leek, tsk. Shui Rui said angrily, do you only know how to eat? The Taoist smiled and said, the people take food as their heaven. Shui Rui choked for a moment, jumped off the swing, interlaced her fingers, and stretched. The Taoist priest looked up at the sky and said softly, it is a good year if there is rain on the spring equinox, but this year, the boundary of the capital is estimated to be sunny and rainless that day. Looking back, the Taoist said with a smile, Pindao pinches his fingers, there may be thunder on the day of Qingming, and the movement is relatively large. At that time, Miss Shui doesn't need to think too much. Shui Rui sneered, it turns out that Chen Daochang is not only a man, but also a god. A real person doesn't show his appearance. The Taoist priest said, there are all kinds of knowledge, difficult and easy, but they are all accumulated thoughts and interpretations. It is not difficult, and it is not difficult. Shui Rui shook her wrist and planned to return. The Taoist priest pointed to the flower hall on the side of the main hall behind him, Miss Shui, in the past few days, Pindao may use this treasure to say hello to Miss Shui first. Shui Rui nodded and asked suspiciously, what are you going to do? Are you going to entertain friends? Are you worried that I will run out and disrupt the situation? The Taoist shook his head and smiled, the secret cannot be revealed. Shui Rui reminded, It's okay to have a banquet, but don't call a few brothel women over to play and cheer up, it's smoky. The Taoist priest waved his hands again and again. It takes dozens of taels of silver, whether to drink or drink money. Shui Rui sneered and said, I know the market, it really is because people are not romantic because they are poor. The Taoist priest said with a smile, men are most afraid of pretending to be stupid. They have money to do things, but they also have no money to be tempted. It is a real honest duty to be as beautiful as a poor Taoist. Shui Rui floated away. The Taoist priest stepped into the side hall, glanced at the long table, nodded, clenched his fists and twisted it gently, preparing to go to the residence to fetch the pen, ink, paper and inkstone, and show his skills here. As soon as he turned his head, the Taoist priest saw a head facing the ground hanging in front of his eyes. He subconsciously smashed it with a fist, and the fist stopped at the door of the ghost's face. He said angrily, Shui Rui, it will scare people to death. The female ghost floated to the ground, and the Taoist walked out of the side hall with high morale. She followed behind and asked, why do you use the flower hole? The Taoist said badly, it's not easy to live in the capital, Ma Wai's grass is not fat, and a poor Taoist can't make money and rent. The female ghost yawned, I'm surprised, you are a three-legged cat chi trainer, and you are also a chi trainer anyway, so you like money so much? To live a life, to recognize money but not people, don't have the word only. To be an immortal, the so-called real person is nothing but serious and not recognizing people, and don't have the word only. Cultivation of the Tao, there are thousands of roads, and all methods can only be explained in one word. Shui Rui frowned and asked, why? Heart. The body and spirit are one, and the heart and spirit are in harmony. Probably because he has traveled abroad for many years and is accustomed to the rivers and lakes, he is very aware of some sloppy sidewalks. In short, this fake Taoist is not high in cultivation and has a lot of knowledge. Anyway, no matter what she talks about, she can pick up the conversation. The Taoist priest said while walking, earth immortals, land immortals, half of heaven and earth, living in the world with refinement, permanent residence in the human world, longevity, almost immortal. Ghost cultivators are called ghosts and immortals. It's just that compared to the former real people on the land, they are still slightly inferior. After all, they are ghosts who have abandoned the body of the yang god, leaving only the yin god. The real Tao, so the idols are unknown, the three mountains are nameless, although it is possible not to fall into reincarnation, but it is still difficult to get green, there is nowhere to go before, there is nowhere to go back, it is more difficult to prove the Tao. Shui Rui followed, listening in a daze. She had heard a lot of things for the first time. I don't know which mystical wild history novel he copied from. Seeing that the middle-aged Taoist stopped and started to pull out his sleeves, he raised his head and smiled and said, Miss Shui, we are all so familiar with each other, so it is not a coincidence. A talisman together. Why don't you do business with a pen? A cultivator such as Miss Shui has the most miraculous effect. Just take a bath and fast, then burn the talisman, light 3 incense sticks, recite it a few times in your heart, and so pays respect to Sanshanjia Mr. Ho, there is no red tape, and the effect is so good that it is unbelievable. She sneered, the old trick is repeated, and you have to kill it again. Don't you know a new trick? The Taoist sighed, don't talk about other talismans, it is indeed a little bit worse, but do you see how I ever took the initiative to sell talismans with Miss Shui? Only this talisman is genuine and innocent, and buying one is a small one. Earn by a stack is a big profit, in short, the more you buy, the more you earn. If the poor Taoist has a good relationship with Miss Shui, he will never show it to others easily. Shui Rui sneered, it's so good, why don't you use it yourself? The Taoist looked at her with pity in his eyes. It's the look in the eyes of a wise man pitying a fool. She knew that she was blundering, and it was true that the other party said that she was a cultivator. He hesitated for a while, then beckoned, "Let me take a look first, and check the pros and cons." Ordinary yellow talisman paper, ground cinnabar for ink, and 3 mountain tops are drawn on the talisman paper. It's weird and doesn't look like a serious talisman. Don't take this advantage. Although she has made up her mind, she still asked, "How many coins do you sell for a talisman?" The Taoist priest complained, "What are you thinking? How many copper coins? You can't even buy a piece of talisman paper." Shui Rui said, "The old Lutu shop on the next street, such inferior yellow paper, only sells a few dollars for a knife. If Qin Dao Chang cuts it smaller, wouldn't it be a huge profit?" It is no wonder that the Taoist priest calls out "brother" every time he sees old Lutu. The talisman paper is not expensive and the technique is high. It is said that if the mountain is not high, there is an immortal spirit. Seeing that the Taoist priest was calm and blushing, he took out a few more talismans from his sleeves. "Forget it, Miss Shui has a good eye. It doesn't matter, these poor Taoist rank are better, but the price is a bit more expensive. The ones at the bottom of the box are usually kept secret." TSK, as expected of a businessman who is used to doing business, interlocking with each other, and a lot of backhands. "Don't be a poor Taoist one by one, Chen Xiancher, aren't you too embarrassed to panic?" Shui Rui threw the talisman back to the Taoist priest and walked away. Spring equinox, no rain, and warm earth. On the outskirts of the capital, apart from those officials' sons and daughters in fresh clothes and angry horses, there are many beauties by the water, with spring flags curling on their heads. The air is full of kites, dexterous swallows, extremely long centipedes, or meet and fight with kites and harriers. The time-honored kite shops in the capital made a lot of money. According to the court etiquette system, the emperor and monarch must sacrifice to the sun on the altar on the spring equinox. After the sacrifice today, His Majesty the Emperor of Yushuan will ask the Yamen of the Ministry of Rites to send a picture of a spring ox made by the Imperial Palace to Beijing officials of the 4th rank or above, and a red paper with a dragon pattern on the second opening, printed with the second letter written by the Bachelor of the Hanlin Academy. 14 solar terms, famous aphorisms, freshly released poems, and a picture of farming carefully drawn by the Painting Academy. Most of the people responsible for sending the pictures are young officials with good looks from the Ministry of Rites, and new scholars from other ministries and departments are often involved. On this day, they were known as the Spring Officials, and the concierge of the royal family and the generals and ministers all needed to return the Spring Officials a symbolic red envelope. Up and down, there are also, said Spring people, with similar identities in the capital. Officials send pictures to the officials, and some people who are active and have a good way to make money send pictures to the rich. After knocking on the door, they say something similar to the host. The auspicious dialect is against the farming season and 5 winds and 10 rains. After a busy day, as long as you have smart legs and walks, you can earn a lot of money. Of course, there are more closed doors. Some wealthy portals who are frequently knocked on the door to ask for red envelopes are too troublesome, so they directly let the concierge drive people away. In the capital of Yuxuangguo, some experienced people who say spring will go to Yongjia Street, even if they walk a long way. Most of the streets are from extremely wealthy families. Otherwise, they would not use the county name to name the street. It wasn't until they were in the market that people in the spring came to send pictures, but they only went to a family with the surname of Ma, because they would definitely not run in vain, and everyone could get a big red envelope. It is said that the concierge of this family distributes red envelopes there all day long. As long as they come to the door to send pictures, and say a few good words like the harvest of the harvest and the good weather, then those who see it will have a share, which is a full 6 taels of silver. No matter how tired the concierge of the Ma family was, all the people who sent the pictures were full of smiles and very kind. There are 2 counties in the capital, roughly the rich in the north and the poor in the south, the latter mainly under the jurisdiction of the Changning County government. Two Shui-Chun people who ran from the north to the south to make a living, 1 year old and one young man. One gave a picture of a spring cow and the other said auspiciousness. Words, from morning to night, I ran for a day, digging out the filial piety that must be turned over to a certain Jianghu gang. In fact, they only earn 3 taels of silver. There is no way, this seemingly temporary business, year after year, there are also many doorways and rules need to be followed. Not everyone can be considered a spring man, let alone someone who can run around and knock on the door. There is a certain opportunity to pick up leaks in the streets of Fengshi. In the twilight, the teenagers are fine, but the old people are a little tired. On this street, they should not knock on the door. Legs, it looks like they are going to return empty-handed. Are the residents in this street so poor? Logically speaking, being so close to the Changning County government office, it shouldn't be so difficult. Previously, the old man gritted his teeth and bought a street with 8 coins and people to send pictures of the spring, 8 coins and silver, just like this. The old man no frown, no splash. The young man said that he was going to try his luck elsewhere, but the old man smiled and said no, and the young man with the basket on his back squatted down and helped the old man lightly beat his legs. The door of the house creaked open, and a middle-aged Taoist priest stepped out. The young man immediately got up and took out a picture of a spring cow from the bamboo box behind him. Grandpa was already very tired, so the opening remarks that should have been said by grandfather, the young man followed all the way today. In fact, all when the memorization is too familiar, he will do it for him, but before the young man can speak, the Taoist priest waved his hand with a smile, and popped out 2 words, go together. The word companion is more effective than any polite rejection. The young man was greatly disappointed, with a suspicious look on his face. It doesn't matter if you don't give money, there is no need for an excuse. It's a normal thing, but why should the Taoist master lie to others? The middle-aged Taoist priest stretched out his hand and took out a piece of rice paper from his sleeve, shook it lightly, stroked his beard and smiled. In this large square city in Changning County, the draft of the Chunyu map was drawn by Pindao himself. The old man immediately stood up, quickly glanced at the so-called spring ox map, first bowed his hands, and then asked with a smile, why does the Taoist still draw the spring ox map? The Taoist priest bowed his head and returned the salute with one hand, poor Dao is poor. Dare to ask how much is a picture of a spring ox drawn by Chang? 10 pennies. The price is so low. How come it's half cheaper than that in Yongzhou County? The pictures sent by Shuo-Chun in the market are almost rougher than the other, and they are different from the spring cow pictures made by the official family, regardless of the material or content. Poor and kind. Then can I book 100 spring cow pictures with the Taoist priest next year? The Taoist priest shook his head and smiled. Unfortunately, the poor Taoist just wandered here, temporarily settled down, and won't stay for a long time. The boy finally opened his mouth and said tentatively, I heard that there is a fortune-telling booth near the Changning County government office. The fortune-telling is very accurate. The palmistry, calligraphy, and copper coin divination are very good. The middle-aged Taoist stroked his beard and smiled. This is a coincidence. If there is no accident, it is the poor Taoist that is far away from the horizon. The young man's face was full of unexpected joy. Is the Taoist priest really that stubborn Wu Xianchang? The Taoist squinted his eyes and twitched his beard. Lang got a false name. On the other side of the wall, the ghost girl in the colorful skirt rolled her eyes. The old man on the side of the steps hesitated to say anything, but just glanced at the young man who depended on each other. His eyes were full of longing and hope, and he couldn't bear to say anything. The Taoist priest smiled and said, This son, is it a marriage or a fortune? The young man blushed in an instant. Why did he still call him young master? This Taoist priest was too kind. The young man summoned his courage and said, "These are not counted. I just wanted to ask if I could ask the Taoist priest to help draw a few talismans, which is the kind of placing a pot on the side of the road, burning talisman paper in it, and paying homage to the ancestors from a distance." People. The Taoist priest asked in confusion, "Why don't you go to the grave to sweep the tomb and burn paper during the Qingming festival?" The boy said, "My grandfather and I are from outside the country. We came from the south and walked a long way. We lost our home a long time ago." The old man sighed. In fact, they were not grandfathers and grandchildren. The twists and turns were hard to describe. At first, the old man took care of a child, and later the child took care of the old man. The Taoist priest asked, "If there is such a talisman, how much would you pay to buy it?" "All the money on me. If it's not enough for the time being, I can write an IOU with the Taoist priest." "How can you take it seriously? How much savings do you currently have?" "I've saved 7 or 8 coins over the years, and a jar of copper coins." "Just so much?" The young man was speechless. The old man feels guilty. Poor Dao can draw 3 official talismans, which can bless the deceased, forgive sins, and eliminate disasters and misfortunes. The Taoist pondered silently, and after a while, shook his head. "It's just that this talisman is precious, your money is far from enough." Just as the young man was about to speak, the Taoist priest was impatient, waved his sleeves, and began to order the guests, "Don't talk more." The young man stood there, and the Taoist priest asked, "Give you 10 days, are you willing to borrow it, steal it, and rob it, and collect 100 taels of silver?" The dark and thin boy lowered his head with a sad expression. Fengkai Taoist priest looked at the boy, and looked at himself in the eyes of the boy. Wait until the boy bows his thanks, and then leaves with the old man. The homeless wanderer misses his hometown and is depressed. The female ghost on the other side of the wall looked gloomy. Words that hurt people have the pain of swords and halberds. The Taoist priest suddenly stopped the young man. The young man turned his head blankly, and the Taoist priest said with a smile, "Tian Xingjian, a gentleman is self-improvement, and those who help themselves are helped by God." The Taoist priest waved his hand, "Go." The young man was stunned, and bowed again. After the Taoist priest wrapped his arms around his sleeves, he turned around and walked back to the house. Shui Rui stood in the door and sneered, "What a cultivator, he is really hard-hearted. If you can't help, don't pretend to be a ghost, take a step back and say that if you don't help, that's all, disgusting not disgusting people." Originally, she had been with this fake Taoist who was all about making money, and after getting along for a long time, her impression improved, and she was still somewhat close. When she saw this scene with her own eyes today, she was really angry. The Taoist said with a smile, "Those who are modest in heart have no false words." The female ghost in the colorful skirt disappeared in a flash, and she said, "Within 3 days, get out of the house." The priest smiled. Night fell. A chirping sounded in the far street. The 2 painted door gods posted on the door of the mansion flashed with gold, and 2 high-ranking officials from the temple of the city god walked out. Shui Rui noticed the strangeness on the other side of the door, and hurriedly floated out from the attic, came to the entrance of the main hall to entertain guests, respectfully, and gave them 1,000 blessings, and said softly, "I have seen Judge Hong, Sister Ji." Judge Wen nodded slightly in greeting. He left the temple of the city god this time with only one confidant, who had been in charge of the Yin-Yang division for 300 years. The chief officials of the Yin and Yang divisions of the city temples in various places, as the head of the divisions, can be regarded as the first auxiliary officials of the city lord. The female heroic spirit in an important position smiled and said, "Rui Nyang, long time no see, stay safe." Shui Rui was born in the palace at the beginning of the founding of the country, and specially for the empress who was just one step away from usurping the throne in the history of Yushuan. She opened the box to check the pomegranate skirt and nicknamed Rui Nyang. She asked softly, "Has the head of the hospital trial also been appointed by default?" The heroic spirit of the city god, nicknamed Sister Ji by Shui Rui, sighed, "Not only the chief of the case, but also the title of Huiyuan of Chunwei in the future must give way to a straw bag." In fact, the entire capital of Chunwei will try to make in the palace exam. It is not surprising that apart from Mache being the champion, other places such as second place, Tanhua, and second-class biography have long been locked behind closed doors. Shui Rui bit her lip, her face full of grief. Why is this? If it's that Mache who has real talent and real learning, then that's all. Why are those playboys able to enter the university? The chief officer of the Department of Yin and Yang hesitated for a moment, and then explained the mystery in one sentence: the military judge is involved. Shui Rui said indignantly, "How dare they play such a child's game when it comes to the balance of a country's literary movement? Ji Xiaoping, you, Judge Hong, and Lord Qing Huang, don't you care if you know this?" Ji Xiaoping said, "The military judge has its own set of rhetoric, which can explain to himself that it is not a matter of favoritism, which involves things such as ancestors' shadows, plus some good deeds in the world. Shui Rui, you can understand that it is some kind of cheating. It's a hole in the Yin and Ming regulations. And the mountain of the Prince of Xia that governs the Yushuan country." Judge Wen frowned and said, "Be careful." Ji Xiaoping had to change her mind and said, "Unless it's a complaint, burn the talisman and throw the ultimatum to the picket division of the Xia Mountain Monarch's mansion. It's just a leap of class complaint, which has always been a taboo in officialdom." When Ji Xiaoping said this, she glanced at the court judge beside her with a complicated expression. The judge Wen laughed at himself. Although it's not a situation where it is impossible for the mud bodhisattva to cross the river, but now I am in the temple of the city god, except for Ji Xiaoping's Yin and Yang division, I can't mobilize anyone, to be honest, even the Wen Yun division. I have already transferred to the military judge, and this is still the case with the Wen Yun division, let alone the rest of the divisions. Once the emperor and the courtier, Yin and Yang, have the same goal. The two divisions of cultural and martial arts in the temple of the city god have no fixed number of powers, and they vary from place to place, just like the salt house of the nearby county government. Because according to the agreement with the ancestors of Zhang's ancestors, as long as there is a first-class jinshi of the latter's descendants, she will complete the contract. Ji Xiaoping said, "There is someone behind the scenes who deliberately wanted to transfer Mr. Hong from the city god temple, the capital of Yushuan. Speaking of which," she said angrily, "a single mouse feces ruined a pot of porridge." Ji Xiaoping took a deep breath and continued to explain with Shui Rui, "Master Hong may go to the vicinity of Dali's companion capital and serve as the lord of the city god of Yizhou. From the literary judge of the city god temple, the capital of the Yushuan kingdom, to the Yizhou city god lord of the Dali dynasty, it is definitely not a relegation, but a solid official fortune." Shui Rui immediately gave a blessing, restrained the anger in her heart, and congratulated softly, "This slave is here to congratulate Judge Hong on his promotion." Judge Wen said with a gloomy expression, "In the officialdom, Gao Sheng is naturally Gao Sheng, but if he just leaves like this, he is not reconciled. The city officials at all levels in the world are not as particular about human relationships as the officialdom in the world. They have no connections or incense to speak of, and they cannot interfere in other affairs from a distance. This is an unshakable iron law. Unless a stranger is in a certain place and involves a similar murder case, the two city temples are likely to jointly handle the case." Shui Rui smiled bitterly and said, "It's been through so many years, just wait a few more years." Judge Wen glanced at the courtyard outside the window and said with a smile, "This Taoist priest who only has private sects, is a well-deserved elegant person." Ji Xiaoping nodded and said, just by looking at the maintenance of those flowers and trees, you will know that this person is not bad. He is more like a mountain villager who is idle and lonely. He is definitely not the kind of money-loving person on the surface. In a hut, the Taoist priest snored loudly. Shui Rui got angry when she thought of this fellow, and said with a dark face, he claims his real name is Chen Jianxian. Ji Xiaoping shook her head and said, if you've heard it, forget it, you can't take it seriously. Judge Hong said with a smile, this pseudonym is better. See the virtuous and think about it, choose the good and follow. Take the law from the top, see the virtuous and think together, the gentleman is cautious and independent, and sees the incompetence and introspects. Ji Xiaoping hesitated for a moment and said, Miss Shui, this temporary resident, Master Hong, and I can't see the depth of his morality. Maybe he is the kind of expert who likes to play in the world, or maybe he is a liar, it's hard to say. After all, he is not a native of Yushuan, so we can't check the files. Since we don't know his true origin, the customs clearance document linked to the private bun is clearly forged. The key point is that he has not violated any laws or regulations in the capital. We can't get the secret book from other countries. It is impossible for her to let the temple of the city god deal with the Dali dynasty for such a private matter. The capital is so big, and the other party chose this house as the place to live, so Shui Rui couldn't help but suspect the other party's intentions. As the civil judge of the temple of the city god, I visited this place twice before, not only to see my old friend, but also to determine the realm of this fake Taoist cultivation realm, and whether he had ulterior motives, and had some plans for the house and the secret treasure. Especially the kind of Yamazawa Yeshio who will do anything to achieve his goals, he can't use any means. In fact, Chen Pingan really just happened to pass by without any intention or intention. A magic weapon that has long been a famous flower and has an owner. It is valuable for money, and it is not that kind of unowned thing. Is it possible to take it by force? Ji Xiaoping's face suddenly changed dramatically and she said, is he here? Ma Kushuan. She didn't even dare to call her by her first name. Judge Wen also had a headache, nodded and said, I just entered the city. I drank a drink at Zhe Mountain God Song Yun before and disappeared. I don't know why I didn't enter the capital until now. Inside the hut, the Taoist priest slowly opened his eyes, but soon his breath was like thunder. End of this chapter. Sort of coming chapter 1010. In the early morning, the sky is bright. The Taoist priest, who was about to get out of bed, began to act as a demon. I saw the Taoist priest holding a peachwood sword, stepping on the gang, and chanting a Tao Ju, copied from nowhere. Please listen to me, there is too much immortality in the ancient times, the sun and the moon are shining together, the mountains and rivers are magnificent, and it is made into a golden elixir with no leaks, and fights with dragons and snakes. The Taoist priest shook out a sweeping leg, rolled up some fallen leaves on the ground, and then a golden rooster stood alone, handing out a sword in his right hand, and a leaf just stopped at the tip of the sword. Clear, light, turbid, heavy, yin and yang, the sky is high and the earth is thick and spiritual, a little spiritual light makes a candle, like a cloud blooming all over the sky, rushing like a decree, put the universe into one sleeve. The Taoist priest shook his sword flower, through his sleeve with his left hand, twisted his body, pointed the sword to the sky, and at the same time tried to roll the leaf into his sleeve, probably because he had not mastered his strength. The leaf swirled in the air, but failed to do so. It's okay to put it in the sleeve, the Taoist priest has his own remedy, a jump, a high kick, the fingers of the left hand close together, and the tip of the sword points elsewhere. The wine, color, wealth and energy are far away. Yunping Yuyo's sun-moon companion, pure yang accumulates yin virtue, Tianguan turns the axis of the earth, Zhongjing Xianzhou, and Master Feng Xian is here to rescue. Shui Rui was speechless for a long time, and suddenly felt a little pity for this Taoist priest who seemed to go mad after drinking a little wine. Yesterday, the Taoist priest and the young man who said the picture in the spring were so snobbish, more or less difficult. She sighed, "Don't mess around like that, it'll just drive you out of the house." I saw that the Taoist priest finally stopped his figure, put one hand behind him, put the other hand and fingers together in front of him, and snorted coldly with his nasal voice. "Shui Rui is not happy all of a sudden. You dare to make further progress. Can you really be an old lady begging you to stay?" The middle-aged Taoist priest put away the peach-wood sword and threw it at the mud. He was thinking about the sword technique of hitting the ground with one hand, but the strength was not enough or the angle was wrong. Still falling. Shui Rui still had some grudges in her heart and asked, "Are you really able to draw that kind of 3 official talismans?" Last night, she asked Judge Hong and Ji Xiaoping. The 2 high-ranking officials of the city god temple shook their heads, saying that this kind of talisman was unheard of. In the end, Judge Hong only said that maybe the talismans on the top of the mountain should not have secret legends, and they must be in the upper 5 realms, which may be feasible. Otherwise, ordinary cultivators of talismans, even the kind of land gods with profound Taoism, would not be able to draw such effects. Talisman. The Taoist priest shook his head and pointed to the peach-wood sword lying on the ground. "You can draw a talisman, but you are not very sure about the talisman. Even if you use the talisman to successfully connect yin and yang, past the gentleman of the temple of the city god, and then want to pass the test in the underworld, it is extremely difficult, and to use an inappropriate analogy, it is somewhat similar to beheading the officials of this dynasty with the sword of Shang Fang from the previous dynasty." Shui Rui immediately raised her eyebrows. She was indeed a liar. The Taoist priest immediately added, "But the poor Taoist has a good friend, who is amazing. He has great supernatural powers, and can speak and follow the law." Shui Rui sneered and said, "Aren't you bragging about not making drafts? Can you still know such a friend on the mountain? Blessed immeasurable heavenly venerate." The Taoist said with one hand, "It's definitely not nonsense. The friends on the mountain of the poor Taoist have a few extremely powerful characters." Shui Rui asked, "For example?" The Taoist priest said, "If there is a chance in the future, I will introduce a friend named Zhong to meet Miss Shui." Shui Rui wondered, "What's your identity? Could it be a genealogical cultivator from a certain immortal mansion?" The Taoist smiled and said, "You will know when you meet. It doesn't matter what your identity is. Heroes don't care about their origins. Heroes don't ask where they come from." Seeing that this Taoist priest didn't seem to be joking, Shui Rui had a new question. "Are you really going to help that boy? What are you trying to do?" The Taoist priest said, "What people see with their eyes is heaven and earth." Shui Rui was confused. "What do you mean?" The Taoist priest had to explain. "A certain expert said that my generation of Taoist monks, if they can help one person in front of them, can help the whole world." On a trip abroad, I chatted a lot with Jing Juzhong and Li Shixing before, and when I chatted with people again, I would inevitably lose a little patience. Shui Rui was silent for a moment. "Who said that?" The Taoist said with a smile, "It's far away in the sky and close in front of you." Shui Rui's face darkened. The Taoist priest said, "I believe that Miss Shui also sees some points. The young man's life is poor now, just because of his rough life. His life has been plundered by many big and small calamities, so now outsiders give him extra, whether it is money or other. Teenagers may not be able to catch it, and it is very easy to turn misfortune instead of good fortune. It is not harmful to help the poor in the market, and it is a good and kind deed to accumulate yin and good fortune. The giant lake is like a stream, and the lake water flows back into the stream. If the latter has a thick life, like a small stream, the waterbed is wide and can bear the load. It is the method of immortality on the mountain. What hurts is the root and yang of a person, which is the so-called unfortunate consumption of the old saying. This principle must be observed, and it is necessary to be cautious. Fortunately, the thickness of life, the increase or decrease of fortune, longevity are not set in stone. In the eyes of the poor, he is a person who has a poor life but is blessed. In short, he has a late blessing. He does not owe the sky, he is not ashamed of the earth, he does not take people as rich, and he does not give in to people as precious. This is why the poor did yesterday. The root of the saying God helps those who help themselves. Shui Rui nodded, but in fact she didn't see the fate of the young man at all. She was just a ghost, neither a warrior nor an official of the temple of the city god. How could she see these mysterious numerology? She hesitated, then me and Zhang Ho. The Taoist said with a smile, Zhang Ho has the protection of his ancestors, and he himself is a person in a blue sarong. Miss Shui gave him a fairy family fate, and Zhang Ho can also accept it. She asked, is there really no sequelae? After all, she is a ghost, but the teenager is a human being. The Taoist priest said, isn't yin and yang only in geography and not in people's hearts? Miss Shui, don't get the order wrong, put the cart before the horse. Shui Rui breathed a sigh of relief. The first time she discovered this fake Taoist priest, it seemed that she still had some real skills. The Taoist priest asked, Miss Shui, since you are not afraid of the scorching sun and wind, why do you stay here and linger? For a small country like Yexuangguo, it is more than enough for a Sevuing cultivator to find a dojo with abundant spiritual energy and establish a sect. Although Shui Rui is a ghost, since she is able to have a close relationship with the judge of the city's capital city and the chief officer of the Yin-Yang division, she thinks that she is not lacking in yin and virtue. Yes, being a mountain goddess is the best choice. Shui Rui said vaguely, at first, I made a bet with someone to learn a poem written on red leaves from the ancients, and was picked up by someone inadvertently, and I made an oath with him in a temple. Year after year, the treasure fan is idle, living up to the bright moon and breeze. Spring and autumn come, the chills are mournful, speechless and condensed. Geese pass by, and the moon is like a hook. The Taoist priest hesitated for a moment, carefully mulling over his words, and asked, Miss Shui, are you proficient in sentence reading? Shui Rui smiled and said, it's all right. I'm relatively interested in exegesis. I have nothing to do, and I have read a lot of works by former sages. Shui Rui would not be embarrassed to discuss exegesis with her, she considered herself an expert. This involved Zhang Ho, a young man next door. He treasured a copybook of Ancestral Inheritance, with a total of 36 characters and no signature, but was praised by Judge Hong as 36 Li Zhu. This copybook is also the foundation of the young man's way. It's a pity that Zhang Hao's aptitude is average and his progress is slow. Now he can be regarded as a monk of the second realm. And these 36 words can be roughly divided into 2 sentences, and the content of the 2 sentences is quite obscure, which involves exegesis skills. She explained the deep meaning to Zhang Ho based on her own sentence, and then helped Zhang Ho embark on the path of Taoism according to a superior guidance method contained in the 36 characters of the copybook. The Taoist smiled and said, when I was young, I once heard a friend, half an elder, talk about the relationship between words, sentences and meanings. He said that every word composed of every sentence has weight. I just lived there, but I didn't feel deeply. Later, I found out that when Xing originally authored the rectification of the name, and I saw it in it back then. Famous is a true metaphor, and the name is used. It is tired to write, and the name is beautiful. Usually all are well known. Seeing this, I suddenly realized it. Shui Rui had a proud look on her face, and pointed to the peachwood sword on the ground. Stop talking nonsense, you will know how to show off your knowledge. Hurry up, use the sword as a pen, write the content, and I will help you break the sentence. At the moment, Chen Pingan was a little depressed, and he didn't know how to open his mouth for a while. The content of the copybook that was treasured by Shui Rui and the teenager was actually not complicated. Anyway, there were only 36 words, and there was indeed an ancient guide hidden in it. Law, and Chen Pingan just glanced at it and looked at the meaning of Taoism, and found that there is some Taoism with one of the three mountains and the Confucian temple ritual system. Of course, Chen Pingan will not covet this Tao Shu of the magic weapon. But the problem is that Shui Rui, a half-hearted exegesis expert, can't say that she is completely wrong, but there must be errors in making a sentence for Zhang Ho. In Taoism on the mountain, the difference of a word often leads to 1,000 miles off topic. Otherwise, why would there be one word on the mountain? Master, this kind of chi trainer. That is to say, the contents of the copybook and the Taoist sages are extremely pure and generous. If Zhang Ho followed Shui Rui's preaching, teaching and demystifying to practice, it is estimated that he would lead the way and lead to the devil. Although Zhang Hao's aptitude is average, he is not a genius of Taoism, and it will be extremely difficult to enter the cave in the future. However, under the preaching of Shui Rui, the young man has practiced this guidance technique since he was a child. Explain the problem. Chen Pingan thought about it, that's all. He was dismissed from the house as a person with ulterior motives, and he said straight to the point, Miss Shui, that Jing Sinong is naturally a great scholar of classics, but he is in the history of Confucianism, and exegesis, many details need to be discussed. For example, some of his sentences have attracted a Confucian sage with the same surname of Jing to refute word by word, so if Miss Shui copied Jing Sinong's sentence reading, Law. Shui Rui's eyes were faint. Have you seen that copybook? Chen Pingan nodded and said, I've seen it. I also know that there is a guidance method hidden in the copybook. Shui Rui was silent. In the case of Mu Duo's repairing fire and banning the common kingdom, he held a candle in the temple in the palace, and gradually went east to Haishi to be in Lusha Shuanan and Qingzhou to the Four Seas. As soon as Chen Pingan stretched out his hand, he controlled the peachwood sword in his hand, and began to write the 36 characters on the ground to help her break the sentence, and at the same time explain to her in detail why it was so. Jing Sinong divided the first 18 characters into 3 sentences. Among them, fire ban is read separately, and the meaning is incomprehensible. The frequent occurrence of fire ban in ritual and sage works is the proof of the linked text. If we follow Jing Sinong's solution, the duties of the official of the ancient palace are too broad, so Jing Sinong was so scolded that he was directly denounced by the other sage as no resignation, just no words. For scholars, it is a very heavy criticism. As for the last 18 characters, there have been disputes within the Confucian temple for hundreds of years, but according to Wen Xing's view, the word Xing Su Fuzi explained Ji An, which should be correct, come, and also, the sun is quite seen, it describes the sun's deflection, and the and is the same as the solution of to, and it goes straight. Therefore, a more reasonable sentence is the east is in the sea, the west is in the quicksand, the south is south, and the sound teaching ends in the Four Seas. Therefore the extended meaning is wherever the sun shines, its voice teaching is practiced. That's why Zhang Hao's Daoyin technique, one of the top of the head cave house, cut open the gate of heaven to lead the way of sunlight, as the way of fire and sun refining, it seems to be pursuing the majestic weather of the sun hanging in the sky, and then passing through a straight line in order to guide the sun. Zhang Ho directly illuminates the sky at noon every day, and the exterior and interior are connected with the interior. In fact, the cave is wrong, and the path of sunlight is also wrong. In this way, practice qi step by step. The right way, the reason is very simple, just think about the house in the world, unless it is the courtyard where the 4 waters return to the church, there is no mansion with a wide open roof, how to keep out the wind and rain. Shui Rui sometimes frowned, sometimes suddenly. The fake Taoist priests who spoke such opinions, whether it was Wu Di or Qin Jianxian, were just one of Qin Ping's avatars. Previously, Qin Pingan used the talisman method to distract himself by attaching himself to a talisman puppet, like a star falling all over Aquarius. For example, the fake Taoist priest in the capital of Yushuan Kingdom, in addition to setting up stalls, will also study the Taoist rituals secretly taught by the great heavenly master outside Longhu Mountain, and because of the relationship between this copybook, he left with fate and started to expound in-depth research. In Yuzhou, there was a Qin Pingan who, as a lay Buddhist of Xiang Buddha, went to a Luzong temple to study and maintain the precepts. The key to the Buddhist principles and purposes of the Vinaya school lies in the word precept, and the precepts are grouped into two categories, abstinence and action and maintenance. Upholding is the practice of all good things, and it is to cultivate all good doors. That's why Qin Pingan here only wrote that Buddhist phrase before. In the realm of Qingxing Kingdom, there is a chi practitioner from a foreign country who reads military books every day in the Xinjiang. Near Xingyang Mountain, there is a place called Kaiyushan Bamboo Branch School, where he serves as an outsider, and uses the method of arithmetic to study the roots of farmers and businesses. Shui Rui looked at the 36 characters on the ground, raised her head, and asked, "Who are you?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Who is not a Taoist on the mountain in the world?" Shui Rui lowered her head again, and looked at the 36 words that were rephrased. The more she thought about it, the more profound she felt. No surprises, this sentence is the correct answer. When Shui Rui raised her head, the middle-aged Taoist priest had already walked away with the peachwood sword, and she asked, "Let's set up a stall." Qin Pingan turned his head and said with a smile, "Pindao is best at observing words and expressions, so he will take the initiative to pack up and get out of the way." Shui Rui shook her head, "You are not renting a house with me, whether you live in it or not, I won't count it." The middle-aged Taoist snorted and suddenly realized, yes, they are all residents, one new and one old. Shui Rui hesitated for a moment. Can Taoist Qin teach the most appropriate method of opening a house and refining fire? The Taoist priest shook his head. Zhang Ho only read the book of sages and sages, and the poor Taoist is vulgar, but he can't teach him the superior magic of the fairy family. Shui Rui was a little anxious. Why do you still hold grudges? The Taoist priest smiled and said, "The money is clearly a man, and the love and hatred are clearly distinguished. He is really a hero. He has no temper or character. How can he be a Taoist priest?" Shui Rui stretched out her hand. "I bought all the talismans that the Taoist priest and I sold before." The Taoist sighed, raised his sleeves quickly, and walked towards her quickly. Pin Dao has long thought that Mr. Zhang's roots are very strange, and with this talisman, it is like a divine help. This year's cold spring is especially obvious. At the end of February, there was also a heavy snowfall. In Jingyang Mansion of Qingling Kingdom, there has been the custom of drinking early wine since ancient times. After the snow melted, even if they were frozen into quails, not only men but also women called friends to each other, and the aroma of meat and wine still wafted in the market. There is a sect of Xianjia with a long history in Jingyang Mansion, the Zhuji sect of Yushan Mountain. A middle-aged man wearing a cotton robe and a pair of suede boots was walking along a creek where the ice surface had just thawed, and the water was gurgling. He was hurriedly stepping on the muddy road. The old man with a face hurried forward in 3 steps. The old man said sternly, "Old. What is going on with you? The main lord is here, and you haven't seen anyone yet. It's a big deal to ask me to come here to pick you up. Do you think it's young Master Xiaoho who invites you to drink?" The man said aggrieved, "Uncle Bai, I'm going out a quarter of an hour earlier." The old man who was called Uncle Bai said angrily, "You have an appointment to drink breakfast at the middle of the hour, so young Master Xiaoho has to be there on time. how can it be enough to arrive at the appointment a quarter of an hour earlier? Understand, how to be a know-it-all. The man bowed his head and sighed, and warmed his hands with a breath. You know guests from outside, and you know from outside. Uncle Bai, calm down, come back and invite you to drink a pot of turpentine wine. The old man glared and said, this is not an example. The man nodded vigorously, guarantee, I won't do it next time. The old man hesitated for a moment, and said in his heart, what kind of temper does young Master Xiaohou have? Even if you haven't experienced it yourself, you should have heard a little bit about it. It's neither serious nor serious. You screwed up this wine bureau, and good things have turned into bad things. Don't you have to turn around and blame me then? The man rubbed his hands and smiled and said, if it's really because of such a trivial matter, I will be hated by young Master Xiaohou. No one will complain about Uncle Bai, and my conscience has not been eaten by dogs. The old man glanced at the scraps on the man's shoulder. Obviously, the boy went down to the pit to find veins and quarry stones. The old man remained calm, but his eyes were a little soft, but he snorted coldly, you are a barefooted person who is not afraid of wearing shoes. If you know guests from outside the door, you don't have to be afraid of eating Zai Son's hanging. It's a big deal, slap the buttocks and leave, don't you have a place for you to stay here? If I'm implicated by you, how can I go? I can carry a hole as the director Yushan running away, don't let me run into you kid, or I will scold you every time I see you. The so-called cold-hearted and warm-hearted, but that's it. There are always some old people who like to deliberately say things that are unpleasant but reasonable, as if they are afraid that others will read him well. The man seemed to be a jerk, and rubbed the old man's shoulders with a hippie smile. Uncle Bai is an old fairy, isn't Yushan still walking as fast as usual? The old man shook his shoulders, shook off the hands of the man in the cotton robe, and taught a lesson. Anyway, you are an acquaintance, save money, buy a decent robe, look at you poor and sour. The man smiled and said, it's not a thing to wear a robe. Besides, the real rich people on the mountain all look like me. Wearing a robe, it's not very atmospheric. How much money do you have? Dare to talk about real rich people, have you seen them? Uncle Bai, when I'm rich, I will wear 7 or 8 robes on my body and show off. Do you wear robes or sell robes? It's okay to sell both while wearing it, Uncle Bai, isn't my business doing well? Uncle Bai said, the rebuilding of the sect cannot be rushed. There is a long way to go. You still have to read the Shanshui Di newspaper and find the elders and brothers of the sect first. Like a genealogy, you don't have the same name. Whether it's restoring the country or establishing a new imperial court, how would you be willing to hand over the ruins of a huge immortal mansion to a 4-level chi practitioner like you, even if that new Jun Dadu, if you are willing to return the original site, will you be able to keep the family business? Because the entire south of Beipingzu was occupied by the wild monster clan, countless mountain gates and monks moved north one after another, and entered the northern area after crossing Dadu. Nowadays, there are still many southern immortal mansions and mountain sects in the newspapers of various landscape houses in Beipingzu. The old department, or recruiting troops, trying to replenish the manpower and restore the old glory. Otherwise, the Ancestors' Hall has been relocated and it is too far away from the original place of the sect. It is necessary to report to those who have been separated for many years. Which country where? Qinzhou nodded and said, it's really not good. If I really want to find the elders of the division, I will go to the head of Gua, ask her to help me rebuild the mountain gate, and then sign a paper mountain alliance with the head of Gua. In this way, the Zhuji faction has down the mountain. Bai Bo laughed angrily, it's fantastic. The earliest patriarchal hall of the Zhuji school was established on the top of Tsayu Mountain. Today, there is still a patriarchal hall ruins, but it was relocated to another place in the hands of the second-generation mountain master. Always feel that the omen is not good. Just because of the cornucopia of Jade Mountain, there is a quarry called Yeshi. The jade produced here can be used to peck inkstones or be used to carve into various precious jades and jade mountains. Reiki veins are similar to chalcedony waterway, although the content is not high, but it is extremely rare on the mountain, especially those large jade, placed in the courtyard, used as a feng shui stone, almost the ones from Qingling Kingdom. Standard for aristocratic families. However, the bamboo branch sect never dared to hide such boulders that could not be found. They would pay tribute to Xingyang Mountain, and then resell them to dignitaries at a high price from a certain peak. The founder of the Bamboo Branch School, who is good at geography and has a unique eye, signed a contract with the imperial court in the early years, and used a very low price to purchase the entire Dao Jade Mountain and the surrounding veins. When the monks of the Zhuji school dig deeper, it is like sitting on a treasure mountain. After realizing it, Xingyang Mountain has never thought that there is such a valuable jade vein hidden under his nose. It is just Zhuji. The faction had already signed a land deed with the court at that time, and it was too late to regret it, but Xingyang Mountain did not make such a ruthless act of slaughtering it. Covenant, the latter actually became the vassal sect of Xingyang Mountain. The current head, Guo Huifeng, is a female cultivator of golden elixir. Only because of the opening of the Bamboo Branch School the ancestor of Shan was a contract with the previous dynasty, so when the founding emperor of Qingling Kingdom sat on the dragon chair 200 years ago, the Zhuji faction and the Jade Mountain encountered a crisis that was about to come. It is said that she is sitting in a large formation on the Mount Jade Mountain, and it is clear that if the Sword Immortal of Xingyang Mountain dares to occupy the ancestral property of the Mount Jade Mountain, she will come to burn all the jade stones, Xingyang Mountain, Qingling Kingdom and Zhuji sect. Or vain. The resolute character of this head female cultivator is evident. Chen Pingan smiled, finally seeing the prodigy brother who worked hard and made a lot of money in Shulongfeng. When he was a mountain master, when he was in Luopao Mountain, he seldom took the initiative to talk about other mountains, let alone a certain monk. But this man is definitely an exception. Not to mention millet grains, even Wanshu and Shiro, the shopkeeper of Qilong Lane, have heard of this. This prodigy brother must never have imagined that he has such a high prestige in Luopao Mountain. According to the old cook, at the wine table, if you don't talk about Brother Zaihu's feet, drinking is tasteless. This well-known wizard brother, named Xiahou Zan, as the proud disciple of the ancestor Yan of Shulongfeng, has been in charge of the espionage affairs of Xingyang Mountain, and has collected intelligence for 20 years. One of the most important intelligence lines is to stare at Chen Pingan and Lu Xianyang in Huaihuang County, Old Longzhou. For this reason, Brother Zaihu's few capable subordinates can be called confidants, and they also cooperate with embroidery. Yuye, Chong Danjiang Shuifu, whether deep or shallow, has climbed up the relationship, and has smashed a lot of immortal money into the latter's pockets to many Shuifu subordinates who claim to have hands and eyes, ears and eyes. But this Xiahou brother from beginning to end has never used the means of inferiority. Of course, he really did not dare to act rashly. After all, the backing of the mountain is Beiyue Pian Mountain. The owner of the mountain has always been the accountant supported by Shanjun Weibo. He is responsible for taking a lot of the gray income of the Shanjun mansion through a nujiadu shared by the two mountains, laundering it into clean immortal money, and secretly flowing into the Shanjun mansion treasury every year. As for that Lu Xianyang, he left his hometown early and went to study for many years with the Confucian Qin clan in Bojuozu. As a result, when he returned home, he was lucky and changed his body. He became the direct disciple of Ruanqiong, Longquan sword sect, and Ruanqiong was the Dali dynasty. The chief offering. The backers on both sides were either Beiyue Shanjun or Chief Delirwan, so Brother Xiahou would dare to mess around. By the time the famous Songmen celebration was over, Brother Xiahou would have completed his merits and virtues. Chen Jiu suddenly said, "Uncle Bai, I beg you, if that Xiahou Jianxian asks, can you say that I paid the fat man for the swollen face for this drink? Uncle Bai said, 3 pots of turpentine wine. Originally, Yushan had to check with Xiahou Zhan on time, so this meal was a public expense of the Zhuji faction, and Baianai didn't have to pay for it himself. 2 pots. Make a deal. In the boundary of Caiyu Mountain, on a bank called Sanhuadan, there is a restaurant of bamboo branch that is not open to the public for business. There is now a wine bureau. The person in charge today is the current mining officer in charge of cutting the Yushan quarry. There was only one guest, a noble person from Xingyang Mountain, a sword immortal who was not too young but also definitely not old, Xiahou Zhan. The escorts were a man and a woman, who knew old customers from outside the door, and a female cultivator Liang Yuping, with the Taoist name Banana Leaf. The hairpin of the female nun is a small and exquisite plantain fan. As for the man, there is nothing to say, he is just an outsider, he looks ordinary, his realm is not high, and his status is average. She got the news out of nowhere and volunteered to participate in the wine party, but Uncle Bai couldn't stop her. Liang Yuping is an apprentice of the Jizu mountain lineage, and it is no surprise that she is the next peak leader. And Jizu mountain is also the incense Dao vein passed down by the previous head. In fact, the bamboo branch faction was divided into 2 factions. The cultivators of the Yushan lineage did not want to be too attached to Xingyang mountain, while the Jizu mountain lineage was determined to seek refuge in the Xingyang mountain. It used to be with Qiuling. The mountains are showing affection everywhere, but now they have turned around and hugged Man Yifeng's thigh. There are 3 types of vassal and subordination relationships on the mountain. The first type is expressly determined that the 2 parties belong to the relationship between the upper and lower mountains. The genealogy of the monks who go down the mountain must be included in the supplementary book of genealogy of the ancestors of the mountain. The status is naturally inferior, and it is extremely difficult to escape the control of the mountain. The second type, the vassal sect, is the kind of subordinate immortal mansion that needs to pay tribute money and materials to the sect master sect on time. The relationship between the Zhuji sect and Xingyang mountain is this kind. The third type is allies on the mountain, but the 2 are very different in strength, and the weaker party does not need to pay tribute, such as Luopao Mountain and Zhuchai Island on the back of Clawfish. The restaurant is 2 stories high, and there is a large room on the 2nd floor, which has always been specially used to entertain the distinguished guests of Xingyang Mountain. Uncle Bai walked up the stairs with a man named Zhou. In the corridor, Liang Yuping was already standing at the door, slender, with a string of priceless Chuzhu bracelets on his wrist. The nun looked at about 30 years old, with a slender body and a mole on the corner of her mouth. The robe she wore today was obviously carefully selected. The thin parts were thinner, and the fat parts were chubby. Liang Yuping saw the Baianai, who held the real power of mining, and complained softly, "Bai Bo, how can I make young Master Xiahou wait for a long time? When you come, young Master Xiahou will tell me not to worry." The female nun's voice was not too loud, not too small. Uncle Bai from the cave house in the corridor could hear it very clearly, and Xiahou Jianxian from the dragon gate in the room must have heard it more clearly. Uncle Bai smiled softly, "That's why Yuping is in charge of hospitality." The nun returned with anger and joy. After entering the room, Uncle Bai bowed his hands in apology, and young Master Xiahou put down the bamboo hat in his hand, stood up, and said with a smile that he didn't have to be so outspoken. Uncle Bai asked, "Xiahou Jianxian, I'll let someone serve you." Xiahou Zhan nodded and smiled. Naturally, it's up to the guest to follow the master. Anyway, I have nothing to do now, so what if I wait for a while, not to mention that fellow Taoist Banana Leaf brews good tea. The Mingqian tea I ordered is still delicious. Uncle Bai looked at the relieved acquaintance from the corner of his eyes. What a fool. The implication of this, I started to ask the teacher for guilt, but I couldn't hear it. Bai Bo repeatedly clasped his fists to beg for mercy. I'm not old-fashioned, I'll drink 3 glasses of fine wine later. The elders are respected. Uncle Bai will treat me like an outsider if he talks like that again. Don't dare. The female cultivator began to smooth things out. Master Xiaoho, today there is a main dish, drunk shrimp, but our restaurant has spent a lot of effort to buy 18 silver, and we made up a plate. Adeli's superintendent of transportation has a passion for incense, so I finally bought it. It's like she bought it out of her own pocket. Uncle Bai didn't care that she was robbed of the credit. Xiahou Zhan said with a smile, Yinzi, also known as Halong, I used to be in the light of Master Long, and I have eaten it several times. The female nun suddenly looked extremely embarrassed. Bai and I is also a big head, but you Liang Yuping think it is rare. You said that you are showing off something with a Shulongfang sword immortal. Shulongfang not only cultivates kendo, the direct disciples often also practice water law, and the water in one continent clearly offers game, certainly not lack of knowledge. It turns out that there is an underground river in Baya Pingzu, which is known as the Dragon Road. It is always a ferry from Xinjiang. There is a unique kind of strange river shrimp in the water. In the north of the river, such as Shushui Kingdom, it is called River Dragon, and in the south, it is nicknamed Silver. A river dragon with a length of 1 finger is a first-class rare and precious river. If a river dragon has lived for 100 years, its body shape is long to 2 fingers. Nowadays, a river dragon with a finger length can be sold for a snow money, and there is no market for it. If you don't have any friendship with the Dali governor's transport office or the whole family of the old Longqing, you can't buy it at all. Xiahou Zhan asked casually, which transport officer is that? Uncle Bai said, it's an officer surnamed Huang. How many officials? It seems to be from the 5th grade. Xiahou Zhan nodded, that's one of the assistants under the command of Governor Yu Yun. In the past, this kind of mountain delicacies were all made by a senior brother who was in charge of money in Shulongfeng, who ordered it directly with the governor of the Dali Chaoyun office, but the surnamed Yu was a big one. It is said that he went to Ziguaguan with the Dali. The children of the clan are very friendly, so they got such a fat shortage. Chen Pingon smiled. Speaking of which, Yu Shanfang, the transport supervisor in charge of this Longdao route, is now at the Dali superintendent's office. Because of Guan Iran's relationship, the 2 parties are still old acquaintances and old wine friends. The wine is even worse, say he is fake drunk, he gets under the table when he drinks too much, and if he is really drunk, he touches the boots of the female cultivator Chi Chi when he gets under the table. Back then, the Dali court set up a new yamen to supervise and take charge of the ferry route of Izhou, Xinjia Ferry, and the transportation of goods on the mountain. The family got 3 chairs. Originally, Guan Iran wanted to sit on the lowest chair relative to the official position. He also persuaded Yu Shanfang to go with him to the newly opened Chao Yunya office. The new friends joined forces, the latter made money cleanly, and the former was promoted smoothly. As a result, Yu Shanfang was reluctant to take office, and as a result, Guan Iran, who talked like a fart, turned his head and ran to become a supervisor of the Dadu. Now, as one of the transport supervisors, Yu Shanfang's most important responsibility is the long north-south long road of Aquarius Island. As for the whole family of the old Dragon City, who had been involved in the Dragon Road business earlier, they once occupied half of the route. After the intervention of the Dali court, the whole family could only obediently retreat behind the scenes and eat some leftovers. The current yamen of the General Administration of Supervision and Transportation of Dali is located on the bank of Jidu, not in Luojing, the capital of Dali, and is a close neighbor to the Haoshuifu of Changchun. The chief officer known as Chao Shui has been promoted from the 3rd rank to the 2nd rank, and the 2 auxiliary officers have also been promoted to the 3rd rank. As a rule, The governor of Chao Yun is not subject to the restraint of the ministry and is directly responsible to the emperor, and can be discounted. Play. In the past 20 years, Yushanfang, which has a prosperous official business, has a good start. It was the first veteran who entered the yamen at the beginning of its establishment. In addition, the earliest 30 mountain routes were reduced to 17 because the Dali dynasty returned to the north of Dadu, and the Song dynasty abolished some of the transportation supervisors and related assistants, mostly Gao Xing or Ping Tiao transferred to the local area. In the prefecture and county, among the remaining transport supervisors, there is Yu Shanfang. From the fourth rank, the key is the long road under his full jurisdiction. Since the northern end is located in the Shushui kingdom in the middle of a continent, it is the only route extending to the main waterway in the southern boundary of Aquarius Island, so even the fool can see that the authority in the hands of Yu Duyun is definitely not limited to the matter of taking the Dragon Road to supervise the transport. The countries and immortals along the river will return the entire treasure at the Dali court. After the mountains and rivers in the south of Pingzhou, the Dali court still regards itself as a vassal state. It is estimated that some of the credit must be attributed to Yu Shanfang. As for the extent of the credit, it only needs to see Yu Shanfang transferred to another place in the future. The height is low, it will be clear. Xiahou seemed to finally see the out-of-door acquaintance who had been mute in the same place, and smiled. "Uncle Bai, who is this?" Uncle Bai said in a deep voice, "Old. What are you still doing?" Qinjiu immediately clasped his fists and said, "Zhuji sect's outer sect knows that the guest is old and has seen Xiahou Jianxian." Xiahou was silent for a moment, then nodded with a smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I have long admired your name." The old movements were stiff, and he kept holding the fist-clasping gesture for a long time before saying, "It's an honor to finally meet Xiahou Jianxian." Xiahou smiled and said nothing. Liang Yuping twitched the corners of his mouth. "It's really dog meat can't get on the table. What did Bai and I think, that he was willing to help this kind of rubbish?" Xiahou could see it, and it was strange. A vassal sect of Xingyang Mountain, the outer sect knows guests only, and is responsible for ushering and sending them. It does not involve the confidential matters of the Zhuji sect, and even has no access to the account books of the outer sect and Kaiyushan. Moreover, as a know-how, every expenditure needs to be recorded in detail, reported to the accountant, and it is possible to give out money. If you want to become an acquaintance of the 8 classic Xianfu sect, you must have a clean background and be well documented. A total of more than 20 people, all of them are relatively young geniuses in Zhufeng, among them Eugene, who is one of the backbones. Sect Master Zhu Huang and Zhu Shitang didn't say anything about it. Zhu Huang just asked those young people to remind the young people in private that they were not allowed to damage the steel. In fact, Shilongfang was not damaged much in this accident, and it was even the only mountain that benefited from misfortune, and the status of the sect was slightly elevated. Only Xiahou, the proud disciple of the Shilongfang Yan Lao Jianxian, was the most frustrated. Liang Yuping started arranging a few vassals of Xingyang Mountain, and said a few words about her own sect, especially how those junior sisters admired Shilongfang in the Jizu mountain lineage where she was located. Xiahou nodded and smiled and said, "Your bamboo branch faction has always been friends with our Xingyang Mountain from generation to generation. Whenever Master mentions Jizu Mountain, he is always full of praise and kind words." Liang Yuping glanced at Uncle Bai sideways. The Yushan Bamboo Branch School is one of the many vassal schools in Xingyang Mountain. In fact, when it was at its peak, there were as many as a dozen such downhill or vassal schools in Xingyang Mountain, but today is different from the past, half of which are nominally, although the vassal sects have not officially separated from their vassal status for the time being. They used to rush to the Zushan Dianmao in Xingyang Mountain on time every time they gathered together by a talisman boat or a private ferry. Send a subordinate to show his face and come here to do business. And Xiahou, the direct disciple of the water dragon peak ancestor, the dignified Dragon Gate sword cultivator, is now only in charge of the collection of the 3 vassal sects north of Xingyang Mountain. Among them, there is the Bamboo Branch School. In fact, where does he need to urge him, and it is not the enclave hilltop that is far away from the emperor. This Jade Mountain is only a few steps away from Xingyang Mountain. Therefore, people with discerning eyes know that Xiahou is regarded as an abandoned child by Xingyang Mountain and Shulongfeng, which means that he has been demoted again and again, and he has been completely on the bench. Speaking from conscience, Xiahou, who is a Longmen realm cultivator, did not slack off or take it lightly when it came to collecting espionage. To be honest, I don't have any personal pockets, and I don't have any greed for money. He just wanted to take credit. Fortunately, there is a place in the Zushan Zushi Hall, which became a sect. Even if the realm is not enough and the etiquette is not suitable, what about the next sect in the future? Therefore, Xiahou, who used to almost never drink alcohol, now drinks booze whenever he gets a chance. Otherwise, as by an eye, would you have to move him, Xiahou? Could it be that the silver that is less than half the length of chopsticks is just based on the Dragon Road? Guo Huifeng, the head of the Bamboo Branch sect, personally invited him to drink. But the other people don't have back pain when they stand and talk. Now there are a lot of gossips in Xingyang Mountain. Although the master and his old man are on the side of the angry sect master, they manage to keep their status as the direct descendant of Shuilong Peak, but they can only make him highly valued. The proud disciple went out to avoid the limelight. How could outsiders know about his difficulties in Xiahou? To collect espionage, he had to bypass the Dali court and the Longzhou government. He also needed to avoid the Beiyue Pian Mountain, which was as good as Luo Pao Mountain in wearing a pair of trousers. As for Lu Xianying, how would he investigate? They all went to Nanbua Suozhou Chunru Qin to study abroad, and that Longquan sword sect, the entire sect, there are only a few people, how to let him infiltrate, how to secretly arrange people. Otherwise, even if it is replaced by Shingao sect, Yunlin sect, such a behemoth, it will not be so difficult. Yuzhua Peak of Yujiao and Liuyu of Cheongji Peak had both practiced swordsmanship in Longquan Jianzong, but Xiahou could never ask any useful information, especially that Yu Qin, before and after he became the peak master, used to be honored as Xiahou Jianxian, and later called Dao Yu Xiahou casually. It was like 2 different people. Therefore, Xiahou can only be a mute and eat Huanglian. Listen to the master, dormant for a few years, don't show your face, and look back for opportunities. At the Huangshan sword sect of Zhongyue Dijie, he will be assigned a position of real power. Xiahou face was gloomy, and he lowered his head and took a sip of suffocating wine. Hidden officer. Is it great? If you really want to meet him, face to face, just like Lao Tzu's temper, he has to ask the sword with his surname Qin. What if you lose? You can't lose your backbone. I believe that the other party will never kill him alive. The old-fashioned out-of-the-way acquaintance finally had the courage to say a fair word. The big sect is like an officialdom, and it will inevitably be contaminated with some bad habits. It is always those who really do things seriously who suffer the most. Well, if you don't do it well, gossip will come flooding your head, openly and secretly, no matter where you can stop it, such as Xiahou Jiangxian's situation. Just flip through the history books. Why is there less? I have to make a toast with Xiahou Jianxian here. Uncle Bai was full of surprise, looking at the old man holding a toast in both hands. This kid finally got enlightened. Xiahou glanced sideways and nodded. Never thought that he could speak. It is no wonder that he can be an outsider on the side of Tsayu Mountain. Xiahou asked, "What's your name?" The man hurriedly registered his account again. Old, Dong Qin, old things are old. It is estimated that his voice was low before, or Xiahozan didn't remember it, the nobles have forgotten things. Xiahozan frowned slightly, and it was annoying to hear that his surname was Qin. Qinjiao seemed to be someone who was fairly good at observing words and expressions, so he immediately began to show his loyalty. I have never had a good impression of that person surnamed Qin in Luopa Mountain, since I heard that there is such a number one person. Full of old fists to him. Xiahozan's face lost a bit of disgust, and the numbness was a little numb, but after all, it was a pleasant word. He narrowed his eyes and asked, Chenjika, you and the mountain master have no relationship and no grievance. Why are you so disgusted with this person? Xiahozan grabbed a river dragon and chewed it slowly. Don't rush to answer, just think about it. You can drink alcohol indiscriminately, but you can't talk nonsense. The atmosphere of the wine table suddenly became solemn. Liang Yuping gloated a little. Uncle Bai began to worry and was worried. You are an out-of-the-way acquaintance, so how can you be flattering like this? Gallbladder. The old covenant is not because of the courage of the wine, and without stage fright, he said, I have read a travel journal of landscapes, and it is the one that wrote about it. Dude, the encounters are endless, unsightly. He is full of benevolence, righteousness and morality. He seems to be a chivalrous person who slays demons and slays demons all the way. In fact, he treats others leniently and leniently at a critical moment. He who refuses to suffer any loss is just a sanctimonious hypocrite. Beauty, money, luck, prestige, it was all cheap for him. Yen ghosts, fox charms, talisman beauties, cuddling red and green, ying and yen are never lacking. Anyway, whenever something happens, there are beauties who will save them and tide over the difficulties. How can there be a little bit of such a rich and powdery journey through the rivers and lakes? Dangerous at all, just leave me alone. Stale drank another glass of wine and snorted again, a person who only likes to reason all the time, and a person who never likes to reason, there is only one thing in common, that is good luck. Nothing really matters. Bai Bo was speechless for a moment. Are you old-fashioned and dislike that young hidden official, or are you just envious of his constant encounters? Xiahozan has a lot of information. He is a superficial person, but he speaks and does things decently. There are only two kinds of foreigners who pay out of their own pockets to pay money. One is that there is so much money in their pocket that they have nowhere to spend it, and the other is willing to spend a small amount of money today to earn a lot of money tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. As for a cheap practitioner from a foreign country who has been exiled to the Zhuji sect, how could he have such a rich family background? No surprise, just thinking about climbing up a relationship with the Zhuji sect, such as Jin Dan Guifeng, and returning home in good clothes in the coming year. Xiahozan's self-confessed vision of seeing people is still very accurate. The other party's humbleness to try not to let flattery appear too blatantly comes out of his bones, and he can't pretend. Knowing that this drink was paid for by the old, Xiahozan rarely took the initiative to toast. After putting down the wine glass, Xiahozan asked with a smile, Chenjika, I heard that you are from Huanghuachuan in the south. You are not a small sect, and it is a stable third-rate immortal mansion in treasure vase. After all these years, there has never been a pillar to prop up the old portal again, but I really care. Compared with the Zhuji faction, your Huanghuachuan is only large in scale, and its background is only deep and not shallow. Do you feel shabby? By the way, I heard that there are several scenic spots in Huanghuachuan. Among them, Xiantong Mountain and Panji Mountain are facing each other. They are not high. They are all plum trees. When the flowers bloom, they are as white as snow. There is a Yuanyuan temple, and it is said that there is a long scroll in the temple. What is it called? Liang Yuping's face changed slightly. In the previous conversation, Xiahozan seemed to have never even heard of this person's name, but he knew that this person was from Huanghuachuan in the south, and he was even more familiar with the customs there. Qinjiao was stunned for a while, and seemed to say cautiously, "I just heard Master occasionally mention that at the foot of the Xiantong Mountain, in the Yuanyuan Lecture Temple, there is indeed a collection of 10,000 plum blossoms outside of Futan, but it is generally not easy to take out. For outsiders to see, the Master still has a good relationship with the abbot, and I only saw it once." Afterwards, the Master and a few of us leaked, saying that this long scroll was not well kept, but unfortunately, there are many black spots on it, and many of the poems and texts are unrecognizable. Qing. As for the vicinity of Panchi Mountain, the plum blossoms in the past really bloomed like a large article, but in the early years, the local people in the local villages cut down a lot of plum trees because the planting of plums was so thin that the orchids could not be sold as potted plants. The so-called plum blossoms like snow is a bit unreal, and literati and pranksters like to go to other places to appreciate plums. Blooming flowers is like a large piece of article. It sounds a bit more remote than Yi by Rushue, Chenjika. You have a good conversation. Xiahou Zhan nodded, stretched out his chopsticks to pick up the drunken shrimp, and turned his head to ask, "Uncle Bai, what is the monthly salary of the Bamboo Branch School's outer sect guest now?" Quickly reported a number, 6 snows to spend. "There will be dividends at the end of the year, but it depends on the market." The pair of chopsticks in Xiahou Zhan's hand paused for a moment, nodded, and said only 3 words, which is not too small. Then nothing was said. Uncle Bai had already understood it, not too much, but not too much. Gotta give the stale a raise. This wine, stale, really didn't please, in vain. At the foot of the Yushan Mountain, the Yeshi River merges into a large river. In the wide river, the official ships of the Qingling Kingdom are chaotic. Many precious utensils carefully crafted by craftsmen on the mountain of Zizipai flowed into the home of a country's honorable generals and ministers through this river. Apricot trees are planted on both sides of the strait, and the trees are full of apricot flowers, and the wind blows like snow. Wind and rain, apricot flowers and snow, the north and south waters beat the sky. At night, a nun stood under the apricot tree. I don't know why, when the flowers are falling, they are all frowning. Bai came here alone and said, "Sect Master, Xiahou Zhan seems to be rambunctious, but in fact he is extremely cautious, and there is no useful sentence at all on the wine table." Guo Huifeng nodded and said, "If you can't control your mouth, how can you manage the information on Jingyang Mountain?" Bai said softly, "The 200-year lease term signed by the Qingling Kingdom's court is about to expire. This Xiahou Zhan, who is in charge of debt collection affairs with our sects at this time, can come here regularly. Wandering around the Jade Mountain, could it be the meaning of Jingyang Mountain Patriarch Hall or Water Dragon Peak?" Guo Huifeng sighed quietly. "Even if there is no secret advice from Sect Master Zhu or Yan Jianxian, I am afraid that Xiahou Zhan himself has the idea of making up for the fault. It was in her hands last time." Regarding the Caiyu Mountain, the Zhuji faction and King Lingguo renewed a 200-year lease contract. This time, the Zhuji faction may find it difficult to keep the ancestral family business of this Jade Mountain. Bai said, "In the contract, it is written clearly in black and white, and our Zhuji faction can give priority to renewing the contract, and even if there are other immortals who want to buy the Jade Mountain, the Zhuji faction can also bid with them, and the one with the higher price wins." Guo Huifeng smiled bitterly and said, "I'm afraid that the tree wants to be quiet and the wind won't stop." Bai didn't know the twists and turns in it. On the side of Shishizu, he deliberately said some light words. Now that the deadline is up, the Zhuji faction has no legitimate reason to occupy the Jade Mountain. If King Lingguo wants to resell it to another home, such as Jingyang Mountain, it will be difficult for the Zhuji faction to compete with the Jingyang Mountain. Even if Jingyang Mountain is willing to bid, the Zhuji faction dares to bid. It's no wonder that the Qingling Kingdom's court came to an imperial consecration not long ago. Those who hide their heads and hide their tails did not dare to let Xingyang Mountain know where they were. They just found Guo Huifeng in private and said some words around the corner, basically implying that Guo Huifeng, our Emperor Your Majesty's side, is actually very willing to renew the contract with the Zhuji faction, and the price is easy to negotiate. Apparently, he was worried that the bamboo branch pie would not even be able to offer a price, so it was picked up by Xingyang Mountain at a very low price. Therefore, for the Qingling Kingdom and the Bamboo Branch School, the ownership of a Jade Mountain in the next few hundred years is an extremely delicate and complicated situation. It is only said that the Emperor of Qingling Kingdom did not dare to provoke Xingyang Mountain, nor did he want to give away a Jade Mountain for nothing. They wanted Zizipai and Guo Huifeng to bid as much as possible, but they didn't want to annoy Zhang Yangshan. As for Guo Huifeng, if he made up his mind not to compete for Yushan, then he would simply not make a bid. Of course, Zhang Yangshan would be happy to see it succeed, but he would have a bad relationship with the Qingling Kingdom court. Either she didn't care about the faces on both sides of Xingyang Mountain and Qingling country, she directly asked Bai Anai to replace his master, who was the sect god of wealth, and bid all the way to 30 grain rain money, no matter what Xingyang Mountain offered, it would be successful. If it doesn't work, it won't work. But once the largest source of wealth is given away, the Zhuji faction is it really going to become the descent of Xingyang Mountain step by step? Guo Huifeng would never be reconciled to this. If it wasn't for the geographical location of her sect, Guo Huifeng didn't want to have anything to do with Xingyang Mountain at all. This was the case before she took over as the head of the sect. She had either seen or heard too much about Xingyang with her own eyes. The unseen act of the mountain. Bai Anai hesitated for a few times, but still summoned up his courage to suggest, "Sect Master, if you really want to keep your ancestral property, and you won't be hated by Xingyang Mountain, can we have a relationship with the mountain to the north, that young Yin Yin?" Official. In the end, the old man probably thought it was absurd, so he couldn't go on. Guo Huifeng couldn't help laughing, but she couldn't help laughing. She was obviously amused by the whimsical idea of Uncle Bai, who do you think I am, a monk in the upper 5 realms, or Li? A native of Zidongshan cultivator? Do you think that if I go there, I can meet that person? Take 10,000 steps back and say, without closing the door, can we negotiate with that person after meeting with that person? Uncle Bai, do you think they are the ones who founded the Shantang? Because of his appearance showing old age, even Guo Huifeng, whose realm and age are far higher than this Bai Anai, will shout Bai Bo with humor. From this, it can be seen that the style of the Zhuji school is not so strict, and everything is only the cultivator's realm. Right. Bai Anai nodded, remembering what the acquaintance said at the wine table earlier. Besides, according to the widely circulated landscape travel notes in the early years, when Shanzhu Qin was young, he was a lover who liked to mess around with flowers. If this is the case, if one is not careful, wouldn't the sect master throw himself into the trap? But don't beat the dog with meat buns. The content of the book of travel notes, would rather believe it or not. Put yourself in the shoes, they are all men, people are not romantic, they are young, and there are a few confidants. Guo Huifeng was full of doubts, and asked curiously, what landscape travel notes? The content is related to that Chiningguan. Can this kind of book be printed and sold? Bai Anai blushed, it's nothing, it's just a miscellaneous book made up by someone who doesn't know who it is. In the river, on an official boat, 2 old sword immortals, who were from the same family, but differed by 1 generation, gathered here in secret. Hanging the curtain is a layer of landscape prohibition to prevent the partition wall from having ears. There are 2 peak masters of Xingyang Mountain, Xia Yuansui of Full Moon Peak and Yan Chu of Shuilong Peak. Yan Chu, haven't you spoken to Xia Hozan? Ancestor Xia, my apprentice has enough intelligence and a strict mouth, but his biggest weakness is that he is not cruel enough to do things. It is not without reason that he has not been able to enter the Golden Core yet. He will definitely help with such secrets. If he's not busy, he won't let him get involved, so as not to cause trouble. After all, Emperor Zhu is not stupid. It would be bad if he noticed the clues. Xia Yuansui squinted and looked at the jade mountain in the distance. It's just a jade vein that has been mined for hundreds of years. The geographer of Qingling Kingdom's Qin Tianjin estimated the value of the reserves not long ago, and it's worth more than 100 grain rain coins, and it is time-consuming and labor-intensive. In fact, it is nothing to give it to Guo Huifeng. Anyway, we have a large share of the account every year in Jingyang Mountain, which is regarded as the salary of hiring people to dig the mountain. The key is that this Guo Huifeng is too stubborn and does not know in general. I always want to draw a clear line with Jingyang Mountain. I just use her to kill the chicken and show the monkeys. Through this opportunity, Guo Huifeng will be ruined, and then the Jizu Mountain will be supported. The Zhuji faction must sign with our Jingyang Mountain contract. The rest of the vassal sects are nothing but grass. As long as you see the miserable situation of Guo Huifeng, you will naturally be honest. How to force her and Zhu Huang to completely tear their faces off. I have a plan of my own, just wait and watch the fun. Ancestor Xia, on the Yujiao Peak, can Yupur and be reliable. I promise to let him also serve as the patriarch of the Shishanhuang Zijian sect after I have done it. Yupur has no reason not to agree. I always feel that this kid is a white-eyed wolf, born with a backbone. Is there a backlash? Not very good. After the dust settles, where can he turn back? Having said that, Xia Yuansui looked at Yan Chu with a smile. Are you going to oppose the Emperor Zhu first and then me? Just rely on him as a Jindan sword cultivator? Yan Chu heard the meaning of the old patriarch, and was slightly embarrassed. Patriarch Xia has overestimated me. How can I be the suzerain, and I have no such ambition and strength? A few tales, very clear. In the future, I will be able to serve as the master of the sect and also serve as the mountain master going down the mountain, and I will already be satisfied. Yuzi is a smart person, and I can tell you it all. I didn't say anything at all. If he rushes to the Zhu Emperor's side to frame my ancestor and want to usurp the throne, I admire the courage of this kid. Xia Yuansui suddenly squinted and smiled and said, Yan Chu, if you can enter the sect after going down the mountain, you must step down as the master of the sect. When Yan Chu saw that Xia Yuansui didn't seem to be joking, the old Yuan Ying's eyes were hot in an instant, and he said decisively, no problem. What about the next sect master? He is also a genuine sect master. In the 3,000 years of Aquarius, there are only a few sects, and how many people have served as the suzerain? Previously, Xia Yuansui was in a discussion at the Patriarch's Hall and suddenly suggested to the various peak swordsmen of Jingyang Mountain, regardless of men, women or children, regardless of realm or origin, as long as they wanted, they could rush to the wild world to make meritorious deeds, use swords to kill demons, and he, Xia Yuansui and Man Yifeng, can lead the team and travel across the world by ferry through a passage to the ruins. As soon as these words came out, there was an uproar in the hall, and many old Jianqiu who were used to leaving the stage halfway through the discussion immediately gave this old patriarch who had been in seclusion for many years a high glance. But the sect master Zhu Huang only said that this matter is important and needs to be considered in the long run. Soon Bamboo Emperor came to the full moon peak and complained about why the uncle did not say hello in advance and went his own way. Xia Yuansui said that he was only traveling far to practice, and he would not rush to the battlefield seriously. Even if he wanted to fight the demon clan, he would make arrangements early, so that he would be able to reverse the perception of Aquarius Island towards our Jingyang Mountain. The Bamboo Emperor was silent, and when he left, he was very depressed. Nowadays, the peaks of Jingyang Mountain, especially those young monks with strong vigor, are extremely dissatisfied with the sect Master Bamboo Emperor. In particular, the agreement with Luo Pao Mountain to erect a monument on the boundary is regarded as a humiliation that has not been seen in Jingyang Mountain for thousands of years. Coupled with the fact that Jingyang Mountain tried to establish the next sect, it was no longer a matter of fact. The sudden departure of Chao Ping, the patrolling envoy, made it clear that the Dali court chose to favor Luo Pao Mountain. Name, Jingyang Mountain has become the laughingstock of a continent. It should have been a brand new Kendo sect in Aquarius, but the young sword cultivators have no face to go down the mountain to go out to practice. Luckily, the bamboo basket was empty, and the original hope of having two sects in one mountain became a bubble, and the many benefits of having one sect became a fantasy. To put it simply, it was the Bamboo Emperor who changed from a mountain master to a sect master, and his personal prestige dropped to the bottom. If there is only one sword cultivator, the Bamboo Emperor, in Jingyang Mountain, who is in the upper 5 realms, in fact, no matter what, it will not be able to shake the position of the suzerain of the Bamboo Emperor. However, Xia Yuansui, the uncle of the Bamboo Emperor, coincidentally, is also a sword immortal in the Jade Pure realm. Master Xia, what did Tao Yanbo say? Naturally, I have a grudge against my nephew, not to mention the fact that the mountain was closed, and I was forced to retreat and think about it, and everyone felt that it was a great shame. Besides, Tao Yanbo knew that if he still wanted to be with that nephew. When the surnamed Qin found his way back, as long as the Emperor Bamboo was the owner of the mountain for one day, it would be a fool's dream, and he had to change the dynasty. Otherwise, if the mountain was closed for 60 years, there would be no way to get any sword repair embryos. The top of the girl's mountain is a lesson from the past. Yen Chu nodded. Tao Yanbo really had a reason to jump over the wall. It has its own water dragon peak, plus the full moon peak of the ancestor of the Jade Pure realm, and Tao Yanbo's Chuling Mountain, so it is not necessary to mention the other peaks. The Bamboo Emperor is in Jingyang Mountain, except for his from his family's ancestral mountain line. Bamboo Emperor is almost a veritable loner. Xia Yuansui said with a smile, to be honest, if I were in the position of Emperor Bamboo, as the sect master, facing the aggressive and well-prepared viewing ceremony, I'm afraid I wouldn't be much better than him. Shaking her head, Xia Yuansui tutade, I can only blame my nephew for his bad life. I, the uncle, have no choice but to share his worries for him. When the Bamboo Emperor was in the nascent Soul realm, he met Li Tuanjing from Fenglei Garden, and not long after he entered the Jade Pure realm, he met the two young people again. Yen Chu raised his glass. Here I wish old ancestor Xia to change his seat. Xia Yuansui also raised his glass and smiled lightly. It's easy to say. Yen Chu suddenly slapped himself lightly. Actually, it's time to call sect master Xia now. Xia Yuansui burst out laughing, and each drank it. Bamboo Branch Pai Jizu Mountain, in an unremarkable elegant mansion, an elderly female revisionist was entertaining a famous guest. She is the peak master of Jizu Mountain, Liang Yuping's master, and the current patriarch of Zhuji sect. And the guest is the Bamboo Emperor. In the Zhuji sect, after Guo Huifeng took over, it gradually divided into two veins, Xiaoyu Mountain and Jizu Mountain. It is not easy to say that the two sides are in the same situation, but there are also undercurrents. In fact, the most fundamental difference lies in the relationship between the two. Yangshan drifted further and further away, and finally broke away from the subordinate status, or simply took refuge in Zhangyangshan. The Bamboo Emperor was playing with a bamboo yellow paper knife refined on the mountain. The scholarly family at the foot of the mountain is mostly used to cut rice paper, and this one in the hands of the Emperor Bamboo can also cut gold and stone. The Bamboo Emperor put the paper cutter back into the guqin-shaped wooden box, handed it to the female nun, and said with a smile, I'll send it to you. She took the knife. After a little thought, she knew what it meant, and asked her to help. He killed with a knife. Emperor Zhu smiled, don't think too much, gifts are just gifts, you don't have to do anything extra, otherwise it will only do bad things. Besides, you finally have a place to stay, and Guo Huifeng is still a senior sister, why bother cannibalism? I hope you can help Guo Huifeng when the time comes, so that this farce will not end up too far. That person is much smarter than you, and of course, much smarter than me. She was greatly surprised. After confirming that he was not joking, she asked in a heartfelt voice, how does the sect master determine that he must be hiding somewhere now, and he must be minding this business? Intuition. In case, that person deliberately stands by, what will the sect master do? The Bamboo Emperor said indifferently, as long as Xia Yuansui is dead, what kind of storms can Yan Chu and Tao Yanbo, who have no hope of going to the 5 realms in this life, create a storm? One of them was that Emperor Bamboo didn't tell the female cultivator. It was under his instigation that Qiu Lingshan Tao Yanbo took the initiative to collude with the uncle. On the other hand, Eugene from Yuzhou Peak was much smarter than Emperor Bamboo imagined, and dared to take the initiative to expose his uncle's treason and usurpation. By the Wild Creek, the out-of-the-way acquaintance named Qinzhou started fishing. Bai and I said goodbye to the sect master and went back to the scattered flower beach alone. He found that the old guy knew how to take a break. He was squatting beside an apricot tree, with his arms wrapped around his sleeves, and stomping his feet gently. After drinking a pot of wine, he took the sheep with him and stared at the water. The old man paced to the stream and said with a smile, don't forget 2 pots of turpentine wine. Stale raised his head, what? Uncle Bai sat on the side and didn't care about the kid's foolishness. He looked up at Xingshu and sighed for no reason, I just entered the Zhuji school back then, and I remember the first time I followed my master to this jade mountain. Walking all the way, I felt that the river was full of apricot blossoms, and it looked good, but I thought of a proverb from my hometown, and I always felt that it was not a good taste. If it was taboo, I told master directly, but master told me that there is a saying at the bottom of the mountain, but there is a principle on the mountain, and this principle is not only not bad, but has a very good meaning. Bai Bo asked with a smile, do you know what this sentence means on the mountain? The man shook his head, Uncle Bai, how can you guess? Uncle Bai nodded, I told master the same way back then. Chen Pingon smiled and said, is there an answer later? Uncle Bai changed completely, clasped the back of his head with both hands, and said lazily, I just read an illusion by chance. According to legend, there is a real person with white bones who is far away and independent. He once slept under a plum tree for a long time and finally realized the truth. The road to immortality. Chen Pingon looked ahead, smiled and said, is Director Lu just so idle? The old man beside him was clearly possessed by Lu Qin using a secret method. Lu Qin quickly put his finger to his mouth, don't say anything, we can talk a little more. Dare to ask Headmaster Lu, how did you find me? Try your luck. Don't talk about it, I believe Li Xing will come here soon, remember to go to Gonglan, and help to see how Lu Cha's fishing skills are now. Lu Qin said helplessly, the reason why Pindao came to Howren secretly is that he couldn't help but want to ask, so that I can confirm with you, whether there is time in the world, whether it is composed of countless fixed stills. When you go out, you can't treat people with sincerity. Okay, I'm afraid of you, Chen Pingon, you and I have a thorough understanding, the two of us opened the skylight and said something bright, did you imprison a certain fake of me? Yes. Sort of coming chapter 10-11. At noon, the sun is in the sky. Chen Pingon put the bamboo pole on the ground, stood up, raised his toes, picked up the wine jug, took a sip of the wine, talk while walking. Lu Chen temporarily lived in the old man's lodging, and took a walk by the stream with Chen Pingon. In the eyes of others, it doesn't seem strange. Uncle Bai, who is the mining officer of Jade Mountain, is old and has always been friends with outsiders. Chen Pingan said, "It's just a false image created out of thin air." Why did Zhang Jiao make such a move to recruit teachers and move the crowd? He did not hesitate to violate the ritual system of the Confucian temple and sneak into the vast world without authorization. Unless... Lu Qin smiled and said, unless Pin Dao originally had one of his thoughts, he never took it back, and it was always floating in Haoren for a long time. Since Pin Dao didn't come from Baiyujing, it's not a violation of the rules of the Confucian temple. Chen Pingan shook his head, unless Headmaster Lu wants to enter the 15th realm immediately, to fill the vacancy after Master's dispersal and before Big Headmaster returned to Baiyujing, so as to shock the 14 states of Qingming. It can be regarded as a ferry boat, presumably Qingming is also the same, just as there is an old saying, if you don't cultivate morality, all people in the boat will be enemies. There is an answer in this heart. As a result, after deductions, Zhang Jiaolu found that the current situation was broken, and the possibility of success was reduced without warning. He felt that something was wrong, and after thinking about it, he thought of me. How long can the teacher stay here? A quarter of an hour. Or a stick of incense? Chen Pingan, you're not a hard-to-guess person. Divide your mind and take risks. You want to bring the world in your heart to the truth, and use techniques to approach the truth. As a result, you are seen through by outsiders. Ordinary monks will still be indecisive, think about it. A compromise, you are different, there are only two choices, one is to wait and see the change and bet on a false alarm, then, while notifying the Confucian temple sages sitting in the sky to close the door and helping to stare at the barrier between heaven and earth, you called Mr. Mo and Miss Xia to block the road. Chen Pingan, after so many years, it seems that you still haven't completely changed this kind of right or wrong. Thoughts and ideas. The two Daoist friends, who had a rather complicated relationship, reunited in a foreign country, but here they are talking in different ways. What's the difference between an idea and a train of thought? Thoughts can be boundless and boundless, but ideas are organized and organized. Chen Pingan nodded. Does this count as a difference in mind? For example, the same path gradually develops sensibility and rationality. Lu Qin smiled and said, heaven learns to cultivate the mind, and people learn to cultivate one's body. The body is at peace and happiness, that is, the gods and people. It may be said in a general way, and the poor Taoist will give a simple example, the tablet of the gods of later generations, the patriarch's hall on the mountain, and the folk ancestral hall below the mountain. There are also imperial temples in Igua. They are generally used to worship ancestors and ancestors. The gods and gods are set to die. The names of the deceased are written among the gods. The small characters on the side are the names of the gods and ancestors. If there is a real difference in the mind, who is the master and who is the second? Chen Pingan wondered, can you make a metaphor like that? Certainly. Lu Qin said, no. Chen Pingan turned his head. If it wasn't for Uncle Bei's body, he really wanted to punch him. Lu Qin said, Pin Dao is just to prove that you guessed wrong. There is no time limit for a quarter of an hour and a stick of incense. Pin Dao can stay as long as he wants in Haoren world, and the Confucian temple can't control Pin Dao. Chen Pingan suddenly said, actually, I was wrong at the beginning. Human sensibility and rationality do not actually diverge from two paths, but go together in the same vein. There is sensibility before rationality, no, it is rationality before sensibility, the difference between heaven and human desires. Just like what you call the gods who are enshrined and the worshippers, trace the origin, you can go back to the ancestors of a surname, and then go up. The body is in the person, and the heart is in the heart. Sky. The little chicken Lu Qin pecking at the rice, nodded vigorously. Oh, to be able to explain it like this, isn't it because the poor road gave a blind cat to see a dead mouse? It's wonderful. Lu Chen first raised his head to look at the sun, then looked around, and shook his sleeves. It really is a big word, and the words of the Tao are like a raging fire. Chen Pingan sighed. Master Lu is amazing. I found my second clone so quickly. Lu Chen smiled and said, anyway, if you have nothing to do, it's better to guess the riddle and solve the problem. With a snort, Lu Chen turned his body and walked sideways, looking at Chen Pingan's profile. This place knows that the guests are old, the Taoist priest Wu Di of Yushuan, plus the avatar of the mangosteen. This is already 3 minds, and then again. In addition, the god master of the village school at the foot of the mountain in Yunzhou, who opened the hall and studied, must not move around very much, not moving like a mountain, that is, it is like the North Pole in the sky, pulling in a straight line from afar. Could it be that the rest of the clones are divided into 7 roads? Well, Pindao finally figured it out. It turned out to be a Big Dipper array of the heaven and earth. Did Master Qin get the inspiration from the golden summit of Tonggishao? It is a great honor. Since the world is determined by the rise and fall of the sun and the moon, and the north and south are determined by the purple star, this means that the 7 minds of Qin Shanzhu are attached to the avatar of Fulu. Are there certain restrictions on the scope of activities in Pingzhou? The hiding places of the remaining 3 clones, Rong Pindao guessed, Daliyu Prefecture, the area of Qingxing country south of Dadu, the last one, a little difficult guess. Anyway, in order to protect the 7 grains of mind from being intercepted by the monks, and to break them down, Shanzhu Chen really put a lot of thought into it. With such a formation, Chen Ping's distraction, which was originally a very risky act, became much more stable. Through the big formation, it was like setting up a life-continuing lamp for the 7 souls scattered all over the place. Unless they were deliberately targeted by the great monks of the unpredictable prophet, it would be difficult for the earth immortals of Aquarius continent to strip off and detain the minds of their clones. Human qi practitioners don't even have a soul. When Chen Pingan's mind disappeared and returned to the Patriarch Hall, revealing the true face of the talisman and puppet, those cultivators would understand that they had provoked something they shouldn't have provoked. Roll. Chen Pingan said, actually, there are 2 auxiliary hidden stars, who are responsible for cooperating from the side, lest the earth immortal will break a certain talisman paper too easily, and the whole body will fall short, so I must immediately take back all the talisman clones. Lu Qin sighed and said, no wonder when you were in Mud Bottle Alley, you would tell Pindao that you have a good memory and remember everything you see. At that time, the young man with straw sandals in the Mud Bottle Alley would still respectfully call himself Daochang Lu, which is really nostalgic. From Daoist Lu, Lu Chen, the bastard, to the current headmaster Lu, I feel very sad. Lu Chen is now glad that he didn't leave this trip in vain. It is definitely a worthwhile trip. The current Chen Pingan is considered to be practicing in the mountains, and he has already reached the middle of the mountain. The so-called halfway of the mountain by Lu Chen is different from ordinary qi practitioners. The location where you can see the scenery on the top of the mountain is qualified to be said to be halfway up the mountain, which has no absolute relationship with the level of the realm. For example, many great cultivators of the Ascension realm have never found an opportunity for the path in their lives. In Lu Chen's eyes, it is still the kind of future the layman on the mountainside. Now, Chen Pingan has found a very broad kendo by virtue of the superposition of the 2 flying swords' life and magical powers, that is, through seeing, hearing, hearsay, and imagining many methods, one after another small 1,000 worlds are assembled. If it is said that before returning to Howran world from the Great Wall of Sword Qi, it was just a slightly immature idea, then when Chen Pingan began to refine a long river of time through gold and copper coins, especially this trip to the outside world has improved it. The moon in the well, the rank of the flying sword, Chinpingan's avatars, the 7 Chinpingan, everything that he saw, heard, thought in the different worlds of Aquarius Island is a kind of real world all the time. As the refining sword that sharpens the sword in the dragon-slaying platform. This way of practicing swordsmanship makes Lu Qin feel a lot more eye-opening. For example, what I saw in the wine bureau today, by Anai, Xiahou Zhan and Liang Yuping, the three people's body, appearance, eyebrows, voice, tone, attitude, look, have been recorded by Zhika, and they have been quietly integrated into the main body Chinpingan swordsmanship world. In short, all the characters and landscapes are a word on the road that Chinpingan walks on, so the banquet at the Sanhua beach in Saiyu Mountain seems to form a sentence. The more words that make up this sentence, the more complex, and the more detailed the content, the closer it is to the truth that is opposed to the fake. As Lu Qin asked before, is there time in the world? Is a one composed of an infinite number of stationary stills? When Lu Qin said this, he regarded the whole world as a book that was completely static. When Lu Qin identified the one, he started to turn the book, and the characters and scenes in the book would flow, consciously and passively. And this statement by Lu Qin is obviously of the same origin and different from that of Li Shixing. Suddenly forgetting a certain word, and suddenly remembering a certain thing, it seems that I have experienced. Life is alive, how sad. The grief of unfounded worry and the cry of the end of the road made Lu Qin feel sad. It's like Chinpingan was out of the sky before, and on the way back to Haoran with Xiaoma and Bai Jing Yufeng, Bai Jing threw him a stack of paper with pictures of ancient landscapes. At that time, Chinpingan felt like a little book, more like Pei Qian in class drawing a certain little person on the corner of the page, in different poses, and quickly turning the page, is a complete set of actions. Therefore, when Chinpingan, the writer of the book, picks out this sentence separately and puts it into the long river of time in the cage, others will see it in the future, and they will feel more real. If it is a banquet today, it is a short sentence. Then Taoist Wu Di is in the house in Yongning County, the capital of Yushuan Kingdom, the female ghost Shui Rui, the young Zhang Ho, and the flowers and plants in the courtyard, plus going out every day drinking drinks with those Yamen subordinate officials, chatting on the street, setting up stalls to tell people's fortune-telling. It's a long sentence that has been stretched to several months. And the false appearance of Lu Qin is the sect of all laws, like the first God Lord tablet. But when Chinpingan was chatting with Li Shixing, when the two sides talked about Zhou Zi, Chinpingan thought, once had an idea that as an anchor for the positioning of the river, it could not be Lu Xun. This is Chinpingan's self-deception similar to an inertial thought. And this method of first deceiving oneself, then deceiving others, and then deceiving the sky was naturally learned by Chinpingan and Chuiyu, but unfortunately they could not learn everything. Know the answer to the test question, and then go back and trace an extremely tedious problem-solving process. At the same time, it happened to be this kind of superfluous self-deception. Chinpingan had this thought, which was equivalent to saying that Lu Chen's name was taboo. This made Lu Chen, who was also watching from afar, suddenly notice something was wrong, and he also began to push back. It was another lingering fear, even not inferior to the impending ambush of the previous Sword Qi Great Wall, and if Lu Chen never left the Qingming world, did not join in the fun, and was isolated from the heavenly secret by a big world, maybe this thread will be missed. Lu Chen's return to Haoran this time is really not illegal of smuggling, but reported to Li Xing in advance. There is really a serious matter coming. As for seeing Chinpingan, it's just a drop-in. Rong Pindao calculates it again. This year's Qingming Day, the mouth of the 7-star array of Qinshanju points to the Yongjia Street in the capital of Yushuan Kingdom. Lu Qin has always learned to walk with crabs, followed in the footsteps of Chinpingan, and asked, "It's just a horse Kushuan, is it worth your distraction to confer a god?" Lu Chen's so-called Fengshen is not the title of Fengzheng, but the title of ban and mountain. Chen Pingan and Ma Kuxuan knew very well that there was an old debt, and some people collected the debt and some paid it back. Maybe 2, maybe 3. If Ma Kuxuan had to stop him, it might be 3 or 4. Will die. Lu Qin turned around and kicked the stone on the road into the stream with one foot. It stands to reason that even if Ma Kuxuan's parents can become gods of mountains and rivers all the way, and invisibly get the protection of the divine way of the monarch mansion of Sia Mountain in one continent, so what? Live your revenge. Yes, it turns out that it is indeed a bit tricky. This couple is actually going to join the ranks of the city god and obtain the amulet of the official ultimatum of the underworld, which is a fork in the road with the gods of mountains and rivers. Oh, more than an amulet, it is the most veritable life-saving amulet in the world. It's strange how to do it, with the mean behavior of Ma Kuxuan's parents, even if they want to rely on various acts of kindness, accumulating yin and virtue ranks in this list. But Fengdu Hades has had the iron rule of doing good at heart is not rewarded since ancient times. People in the world, even if they are proficient in the yin laws of the underworld, want to accumulate merits and exploit loopholes, then this threshold alone, they are destined to be unable to cross, and it is pure wishful thinking to want to be the high-ranking city god. Chen Pingan finally said, Ma Kuxuan is very smart. He has long deliberately bypassed the two of them, secretly arranged manpower in the capital of Yushuan Kingdom, and only forced his parents to do certain things, but deliberately did not explain the reason. He did not even allow them to ask why, and he used extremely harsh words to warn or even intimidate his parents. It is better to teach a man to fish than to give him a fish. Ma Kuxuan does the opposite. It may be a bit slower, but it is effective. Lu Qin smiled and said, when did Ma Kuxuan start this plan? Chen Pingan said, it's not too late, and it's definitely not too early. Back then, the Ma family in Xing moved out of the town together with the group of relatives, directly out of the Dali dynasty at that time, and went to the Yushuan country in the border of Xia. At that time, Ma Kuxuan was arrogant. He didn't think I was qualified to be his enemy. The reason why he let his parents move out of his hometown was probably because he was worried about their fate. He was more like Kai Jinjian and Fu Nanhua. To practice in Jinhua Mountain, it is impossible to stare at Lizhu Cave all the time. When I left the Sword Chi Great Wall for the first time and returned to Aquarius Island, especially when I walked out of Shujian Lake, Ma Kuxuan might have become wary, but a larger proportion is that he deliberately disgusted me and made me want to take revenge. But I was unable to take revenge for a long time, and I even felt hopeless for revenge for the rest of my life, and wanted me to live in hatred and guilt for the rest of my life. When I served as the hidden officer of the Great Wall of Sword Chi and the news came back to Howran World, Ma Kuxuan began to really regard me as in order to threaten. I carefully studied what was done in front of and behind the scenes of the Moss stage in Yushuan Kingdom. It was in those few years that the younger brothers of various houses began to make frequent shots, and even began to try to pass the imperial examinations of their descendants, get official orders, shine on the lintel, and later on, trying to get one or several people to get the imperial posthumous title, posthumously to the family, and many other measures, all began to be carried out step by step. The only accident is that Ma Kuxuan did not expect that I would catch up with him so quickly. The last time Luopao Mountain visited Jingyang Mountain, Ma Kuxuan had followed the advice of Yu Shiwu of Jinhua Mountain. It's a pity that Qin Pingan almost dismantled the entire Jingyang Mountain, and still did not give Ma Kuxuan the chance to take action. Qin Pingan smiled and said, when Ma Kuxuan's parents become the city gods of the Yushuan country, I believe that the first thing they will clean up will be the evildoers in the Ma family, and they will be able to secure their golden bodies. The temple of the city god. Gao Xing, the civil judge, was transferred out of the capital of Yushuan Kingdom. Ji Xiaoping, the former head of the Yin and Yang division, was promoted to the literary judge. bit. Lu Qin smiled and said, as expected of Ma Kuxuan, he is entrusted with good intentions. The city gods at all levels in a country are different from the gods of mountains and rivers. Although the Yueshanjin has the right to govern the two, the real superior of the former is the Fengdu underworld. In short, the Yueshanjin can directly decide the promotion of the landscape gods, and even the life and death can be claimed, but it is not qualified to punish the city gods at all levels, and must be handed over to Fengdu for conviction according to the law. That is to say, the Deyue mountain monarch's mansion has part of the right to convict the city gods at all levels, but no execution power. In the Shanshui officialdom, the temple of the city god is like the censor's desk of the imperial court of a country. Of course, Ma Kuxuan was able to do this because Lizidongshan formed a cycle of heaven and earth. In the past, the life and death and sins of the people in the small town were not controlled by the underworld and the underworld within Fengdu. Lu Qin asked, is there a way to crack it? Chen Pingan nodded and said, yes. The kind of way that your sword cultivators are unreasonable once in a while. On the contrary, follow the rules. Not to mention the city god temple of the Yushuan kingdom, and the Fengdu underworld, there is no fault at all. Since there is no fault, there is no way to protect Ma Kuxuan's parents according to the laws of the underworld, and in the end they can only be fair. Act without favoritism. If you don't do this, you will only be entangled, and when will the grievances be repaid? The previous generation's grievances, our generation should thoroughly understand, repaying kindness and revenge, and not leaving it to the next generation. Lu Qin smiled and said, Ma Kuxuan has been thinking about everything, and he lost everything. Wouldn't he be mad at you? Chen Pingan said, his mind is tenacious, and he can't be mad at him. Lu Qin was speechless. Pindao is just joking with you, you don't need to be so rigid. Lu Qin changed a more pleasing topic, Chen Pingan, you are really acting like a guest. Previously, Lu Qin had suggested that Chen Pingan should be an acquaintance who was sent to us when he had the opportunity, which would be very interesting. Chen Pingan smiled and said, being kind is like a flow. Lu Xinshan sighed, what you see with your eyes is the world, how precious and how fragile a person's memory is. The setting sun is about to set, and the purple and green are in all shapes and sizes, changing in an instant, like a dream. No, isn't it noon, why is it sunset? Too big, Lu Qin knew something was wrong, and immediately closed his eyes and opened them again. Often walking by the river without wet shoes, miserable. You, Chen Pingan, are too reluctant to remember the old feelings. Pindao is the old Yulao who helps you and Ning's red line. By the river, Uncle Bai sat beside the apricot tree and asked, how many fish have you caught? The squatting Chen Pingan held a fishing rod and smiled, there is no catch for the time being, only one big fish has bit the bait, but even if he is hooked, he may not be able to walk ashore. Uncle Bai smiled and said, you're a cheat trainer anyway, but you still can't catch a fish. Chen Pingan raised his face and nodded and said, the fish has become fine. Uncle Bai laughed dumbly, and the stinky boy is quite good at telling jokes. In a bizarre and mysterious realm, Lu Qin and a Lu Qin looked at each other, like looking in a mirror, so there were countless Lu Qins in the eyes of both sides. Sword of Coming Chapter 10-12. At the gate of Luopao Mountain, the grain of millet is sitting in danger, and the golden pole and the green bamboo stick are on the table. Daoist Master Xianwei was chatting hotly with a young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown. The other party claimed to have met the mountain master at the end of Qingping, and was a close friend of Jingqing Taoist friend. The little girl in black kept staring at the teacups of the two Taoist priests. I saw them drinking, but they didn't know the bottom, and they didn't give any chance to help me with water. She was bored, and subconsciously stretched out her hand, twisted the green bamboo stick, rolled gently, making a creaking noise. She immediately stopped, and sure enough, seeing the foreign Taoist priest turning her head around, Xiaomi quickly apologized, and then straightened her back. Stretched out a hand forward and motioned for the two of you to continue the discussion. The Taoist had a good temper and said with a smile, "It's okay, there are often thin as wild cranes chatting and quarreling in the dojo, and if anyone mentions something exciting, a jade chime will sound, which is very crisp and sweet." On the mountain, a boy in Tsingyi first threw his sleeves and swayed, walking from the bluestone road in the mountain to the Shinto steps that led to the temple on the top of the mountain in the past. Whether or not he was lazy, Chen Lingjun put his hands on his hips and looked at the mountain gate. His heart tightened, and he quickly stretched out a palm to cover his eyebrows. Shit, I didn't read it wrong. It really was the one who suffered thousands of knives and actually killed himself at his door. His master's real body was still working as a teacher at the school. Chen Lingjun immediately shrank his neck and tiptoed, and was about to return to his residence. When he arrived at the house, he jumped into the bed, the blanket was stuffed, and thunder didn't even want to wake him up. "Fellow Daoist Jingqing, don't pretend that you can't see Pindao, come to the foot of the mountain to drink tea together." Chen Lingjun covered his ears with his hands, pretending that he couldn't hear the voice of his heart, just burying his head and running all the way, and said to himself, "Last night, the rain poured, the thunder and lightning, the wind pulled the wood, the building was crumbling. My dear, this kind of momentum is really terrible. The bed and the entire residence are like a leaf boat in the pine waves and sea waves, deafening. No wonder I can't hear anything all day today. It was really deafening. What is good? How is this good?" As a result, with a hand holding his head, Chen Lingjun looked up and saw that it was his own master with a warm smile. "Let's go down the mountain to entertain guests together." The boy in Tsingyi coughed, and suddenly he was bold. "All right, I have to go meet that uninvited guest for a while. It's not a day or two to see him unpleasant, whether it's bearable or unbearable." The mountain master in front of him, although it is not the real body of the master, why not? The last time I watched the opening ceremony of the Huangliang sect, in Lushan, the mountain owner was not around, and I didn't deal with this man named Lu very well. I lost a little face on the ground, and I have to find a place today. Lu Qin turned his head and saw Qin Pingan in a green shirt who came down the mountain, with some ink stains on his hands. The Lord of God was in the school at the foot of the mountain near the source of the Shimei River, and Qin Pingan was also one of the clones in front of him. He was responsible for copying books and recording and summarizing what the other 6 people saw and heard. Lu Chen's eyes complained, "Qin Pingan, Pindao is visiting today, and he has no gifts and no gifts. Why are you still angry?" It turned out that Lu Chen and his mind had completely lost the traction of the avenue on the side of the Sanhua beach in the Jade Mountain. To say that he was inattentive and said, was done by Gao Gu of Huayang Palace in Difei Mountain, that's all, but Qin Pingan is still only in the nascent soul realm. When Qin Pingan is in the ascension realm, is it still worth it? Chen Lingjun glared and said, "How arrogant, so bold. How dare you call my mountain master by his name?" As long as the good mountain master stayed by his side, Chen Lingjun would be almost completely drunk. "Fellow Daoist Jingqing, wait, there will always be a time when the two of us will meet again." Lu Qin gave the boy in Tsingyi a thumbs up. "When the time comes, the poor road will give you a bowl," and the fellow sees the two with tears in their eyes, "and you are crying so hard, you can invite the poor road back to drink a bowl of bitter wine." Chen Lingjun's face was embarrassed, and he reached out and grabbed Qin Pingan's sleeve. "Because I remembered a mantra of Bai Xian, don't go on the road at night, don't be alone." Qin Pingan shook his sleeves and held down the head of the boy in Tsingyi. "It's on his own territory anyway. He said that a loser will not lose. It's different when someone supports him." Chen Lingjun put his hands on his hips and moved his mouth slightly. It seemed that he was brewing a killer trick. Lu Qin said angrily, "Don't blame me if you dare to spit." Having said that, Lu Qin took a sip of tea from the bowl, raised his head, and finished drinking. Lu Qin shook his head, his Adam's apple moved slightly. "Then fight on your own merits." Chen Lingjun thought about it. Xiaomi Milik hurriedly ran to Chen Pingan's side, stood on tiptoe, put his hand to his mouth, and whispered information. "Good mountain master, the Daoist Lu said just now that you both went out to practice together, trekking mountains and rivers, and I don't know how many mountains and rivers you have traveled. Water has gone through all kinds of difficulties and dangers, but fortunately, the brothers worked together to break the gold, and finally there were no surprises every time, and then one time in a place called Kaiyushan, he paid you a treat, saved a wine bureau, and you were in front of you. A fairy named Liang Yuping, with the Taoist named Jiaoshan, praised her in front of her for her good looks. Of course I don't believe it at all. Daoist Xianwei. Doubtful. The Daoist master Xianwei also asked how fat and thin the girl Liang was. Daoist Lu said that the fairy sister was so beautiful and beautiful. He used 7 or 8 idioms. After listening to it for a long time, Daoist Xianwei just said, "Su." Daoist Lu immediately changed the popular statement, saying that Miss Liang, from the front and the back, is excellent, but the side view is a little dull, and Daoist Xianwei let out a long sigh when he heard the words. After picking up a bowl of tea, I became lethargic. After that, the 2 Taoist priests seemed to be in pairs. One said that they were walking in the snow, and the other said that there was a fire in the sky. The rest still have a lot of twists and turns. I don't even remember where I went. Good man, Mountain Lord, you walked to the gate of the mountain. Just now, Daoist Lu talked about the decline of the divine way and revered fate, and what should you revere in the decline of fate? Chen Lingjun pricked up his ears. What else? It is understandable and excusable to want to come to the mountain master to say a few scenes at the wine table. Xianwei was stunned. Millet grains, did you listen carefully? Before you sat there yawning, confused, and the chicken pecking at the rice, was it all an illusion? It's just that Pin Dao and Lu Daochang talked so much about serious knowledge, why can't you remember them, but these few irrelevant idle days, remember so firmly? Xiaomi Meili didn't forget to grin at the Daoist immortal way and extended his thumb, both to say good things and to ask for credit. Good man Mountain Master, our Daoist immortal way is very considerate in hospitality, I see it all in my eyes, no leaks, talk and do things, very stable. Chen Pingan walked behind the Xianwei who had been praised, put his hands on the shoulders of his janitor, and complained softly, Chen's character cannot be trusted by outsiders, after all, he is an outsider, so let him go, Xianwei said. Chang is his own family, how can he be dubious? Captain Xian called Chu and said, I was taken to the ditch. Lu Chen supported the lotus crown on his head and said with a smile, Xiaoli, Daoist Xianwei, I have nothing to do with you here. Rong Pindao, Shanzhu Chen and Daoist Jingqing have a sweet memory. Chen Pingan nodded, and Xiaomi Meili got up obediently and returned to the mountain, planning to talk to Sister Wanshu at the foot of the mountain, and met a young Taoist priest named Lu, who spoke witty and friendly. Xianwei said goodbye, went to sit on the bamboo chair at the door, and took out a book with a strong rubbing from his arms. Hey, I got it wrong, and quickly changed to a brand new serious book. Chen Lingjun sat on a bench with the good man Mountain Master, and found that he needed to face the headmaster Lu face to face, so he moved his little by little and slowly moved to the other end of the bench to sit on. I still felt uneasy, so I raised my feet, turned around, and faced the mountain. I suddenly felt that the scenery was unique here. Lu Qin looked at the back of the boy in Tsing Yi, smiled and grabbed the white bowl. The mouth of the bowl was facing down, and a drop of tea was dropped on the table. In an instant, clouds and mist rose, and a landscape painting appeared. It is a majestic mountain range. There is a call on the top of the ancestor, a small bridge and flowing water in the call, and an ancient temple. Chen Pingon glanced at it and asked, "Is there a tree missing?" Lu Qin shook his wrist, and another drop of tea fell on the table, and said with surprise, "Is Lord Chen so familiar with the customs of our Qingming world?" Chen Pingon smiled and said, "The world of Qingming is a geographical situation of 9 mountains and 1 water. If Qin Lingjun followed you here, it would be difficult for the Yufu dynasty to succeed, right?" Lu Qin smiled and said, "It's a matter of human action, and there are poor people who are waving the flag and shouting, advocating and building momentum. I really don't dare to say whether it will be successful or not." When Qin Lingjun heard the words, he immediately turned around and put his hands on the table. "What are you talking about?" The picture on the table is located on the border between Yongzhou and Peizhou in the Qingming world, and the 2 states are separated by a big ditch. In Yongzhou, on the top of the mountain range at the bottom of the water, there is a place recorded as a dressing table, commonly known as wash basin, with a stone bridge spanning the stream, named Huilong Bridge. There is a mountain shrine by the bridge, which hides one of the joint cuts in the past. There is a 10,000-year-old camphor tree outside the temple, which is rumored to be in charge of the luck of the 4 states of Qingming. Zhu Xian, the empress of the Yufu dynasty, is going to hold a grand ceremony here. With her character, Lu Qin knows with her that she will chop 4 branches. Before Lu Qin traveled far to go to Lizhu Cave, he had promised this Zhu Xian that he would bring a chief worshipper to her and the Yufu dynasty. As a result, our headmaster Lu talked like a fart, and dragged on and on. Last time, Lu Qin he even had the face to go to the mountain god temple, so he turned his face and refused to admit it. As Chen Pingon said, the Qingming world is different from the Haoran world with abundant water transportation. Chen Pingon suddenly said, "Before the old Guanzhou left Haoran Tianxia, he took away a lot of Donghai seawater. According to his seniority, Lei Guanzu can be regarded as the uncle of Lu Zhangjiao, and if the water transport is tilted to the source of Dadu, Chen Lingjun will rely on it again. The opportunity to walk into the sea and turn into a dragon is indeed not small. After all, this kind of water has never happened before, and it is estimated that there will be no more in the future." The old master gave water transportation and merits, adding water to Dadu and entering the sea violently. If Headmaster Lu and Uncle Shi have negotiated in advance, they can transfer part of the merits to Chen Lingjun, and then the monks from the Yufu dynasty will be dedicated to protecting the Tao all the way on both sides of the strait. Headmaster Lu is watching secretly to rule out all accidents. Lu Qin looked at the boy in Tsing-yi, and snorted coldly, "Fellow Daoist Jingqing, do you hear me? You are still here with Pindo's nose, not eyes, or eyes. You can feel your conscience and talk about it. Who are you arguing with? Damn, this stupid little is too ungrateful. If you followed him to the Qingming world, what kind of luck would be waiting for him? Just lie down and enjoy yourself." It was Lu Chen's matchmaking. According to the agreement, he would first find a chief worshipper in the Yufu dynasty. The Emperor Zhu Xian was a very courageous woman, and she would definitely exhaust the treasury to ensure Chen Lingjun's success in Data's escape. He turned into a dragon and left, no accident. He can compete with Wang Zhu of the Mud Bottle Alley to compete for the great chance of becoming the first real dragon in the world. When the real dragon reappears in the world, Chen Qinglu, who is a dragon slayer, will return to the 14th realm on this basis, and he will have to cross the world and rush to Qingming to find out, even if this sword cultivator is not involved in the vast and wild wars, also may not be able to kill the dragon, but with Chen Qingli's usual temper, in all likelihood, there will be a conflict with Zhu Xian, the mountain temple, or the female crown Wuzhou where the dojo is located in Yongzhou. At that time, the 10,000-year-old camphor tree will be cut off by a sword, and Zhu Xian is still divination, so now there will be chaos in several states in the world, even if it is broken. Although it is still a means to treat the symptoms and not the root cause, Lu Chen can at least delay Jiazi's time for Bai Yujing and senior brother Yu. Among them, the one who benefits the most is Chen Lingjun, a little snake in the river. He doesn't need him to do anything, and it is destined to be stable and without any sequelae. There will even be an additional Taoist protector. After all, Chen Qinglu only wants to maintain the 14 realms. There must be one true dragon in the world, and only one. Besides, judging from the way Chen Lingjun has gotten along with the Dragon Slayer over the years, I believe that in the Yufu dynasty in Yongzhou, he would only be brothers and sisters with Chen Qinglu, and get along very well, for example, drinking a little wine every other day. As for the process of walking away, roughly as Chen Pingon said, the water of the East China Sea that Master Bixiao still puts in the sword-raising gourd is an indispensable key link. Otherwise, even if Lu Chen was in charge of Bai Yujing, he would not be able to tear down the east wall to make up for the west wall. Chen Lingjun frowned, raised a finger, and said with a serious expression, "Let me slow down, I can't turn my head around for a while. I have to think carefully before making a conclusion." Lu Chen rolled his eyes and said, "You can come up with a fart with a mushy brain." Chen Pingon smiled and said, "Headmaster Lu's general meaning is that as long as you followed him to this Yongzhou, you will have great confidence that you will succeed in transforming into a dragon." Before the Wangzhu, he became the first real dragon in the world. The real thing needs to be like the wind and the rain, and there is no need to worry about being targeted by the dragon killer. Ascension, the real dragon, is the chief enshrined in the Yufu dynasty. Your identity is no different from the water transport co-owners of the 14 states of Qingming, and most importantly, there is the biggest amulet, because you are equivalent to the protection of Bai Yujing's avenues, a world, an immortal mansion on a mountain, a dynasty under the mountain, where to go all of them are guests, and I have to praise you, Patriarch Jingqing, you are a great hero. The boy in Tsing Yi blinked, the mountain master understood what he said, he was silent for a moment, and finally asked a question, "Then what?" "In a foreign land, you have achieved great success, you have become rich, and you have new friends all over the world, but even if you put aside those wine and meat friends who only call themselves brothers at the wine table, there are also several true friends who can be called true friends who share weal and woe. But here, down and out mountain, what to do?" Chen Lingjun looked up at the mountain. There were stupid girls, millet grains, old cooks, and then turned to look at Daoist Xianwei at the door. A little further away, there would be a Kukusu, who often loses face, but in fact always Brother Wei, who is good enough to wear a pair of chopsticks with Luo Pao Mountain. Chen Pingon and Lu Chen looked at each other. "How?" Lu Chen smiled. "Really?" Others said, "Like this, or to be more precise, they think so, they may be regretful, knowing that this is the case, pretending to be light-hearted, at least they are swollen and fat, and they don't want to admit that they missed such an opportunity." But Chen Lingjun is really different. Just look at how Chen Lingjun has been thinking about the Yujiang water god brother over the years and helping him time and time again. You can see how much the boy in Tsing Yi, who calls himself Little White Tiao in Yujiang Waves, Little Dragon King on Luopa Mountain, values loyalty. My friend is not good to me, and there are always his difficulties, but I can't be indifferent to my friend. I can't make my friends feel that I have made a friend like me for nothing, otherwise I have a problem with my life. This is probably the only purpose of Chen Lingjun's life in the arena. Just like a truth, if you tell 100 people, 98 of them make sense, but there are 2 that don't make sense. Maybe one is a staunch skeptic, and the other is not serious after knowing the truth. In the final analysis, Chen Lingjun was reluctant to bear all the people and everything in Luo Pao Mountain. Lu Chen rolled up his sleeves and put away the landscape painting on the table. Chen Pingon asked Chen Lingjun to go to the stove to fetch a pot and add water. This year, the old cook picked the green tea from a few old tea trees on the other side of Huanghu Mountain, and made it by himself. The tea before the rain can stand up to brewing, and it is mountain spring water, which is very sweet to drink. Chen Lingjun poured hot water into the 2 bowls on the table, but he seemed to have forgotten his own white bowl. Walking was a little buoyant, so he was not in a hurry to climb the mountain. Chen Lingjun first carried his hands and then went to Daoist Xianwei's side. He patted his shoulder and said a few sincere words before slowly climbing the mountain. Being mixed in the rivers and lakes, the righteous words are the first, the poor and the lowly cannot be moved, and the mighty cannot be surrendered. Forced by the situation, occasionally kowtow a few times, it is not ashamed, and it is also a man who can bend and stretch. Lu Chen, this melon skin, do you think I'm stupid and become a real dragon, and people who kill dragons can't come and cut me? What's the brain? I'm not smart. If you're smart, you can't say this kind of talk about bragging and not writing drafts, and by Yujing's 3rd headmaster, he'll do it, please don't go. Seeing the millet with a golden pole on his shoulder and a green bamboo stick on his shoulder, Chen Lingjun carried it with both hands, nodded, and said old-fashionedly, a millet, it's a mountain tour. Millet didn't stop, just glanced at him, she sighed, and continued to patrol the mountain. Jing Qing is good or not, this is the brain, alas, worry. Chen Lingjun, who originally wanted to brag a few words with Xiaoli, immediately felt that it was meaningless, not to talk about the idle days. Chen Lingjun quickly followed Xiaoli, slapped up his sleeves, and patrolled the mountain together. Xing asked, is there still tea over there? I saw that there were quite a few days ago. It's not a problem to fill a bag. Didn't the old cook steal it? Millet immediately pursed her lips, rolled her eyes lit up, hey, he stomped his feet and said, just say it, go to sleep and look at it again, if it's gone, it's gone. Chen Lingjun pretended to be angry and said, old cook, this gluttonous thief, is lawless. Let's go, let's talk to him. Millet Grain quickly grabbed Chen Lingjun's sleeve, frowned 2 pale yellow brows, and said solemnly, Jingqing, I know there is a good place, there are tea slices, but more. Lu Chen said coldly, forming words and sentences, layer upon layer, only adding and not subtracting, too much is too much. Chen Pingan nodded and said, those clones won't stay outside for too long. Lu Chen smiled and said, how many copies do you need? 30, or 100, or to be more stable, 300 or 500. Just like a person talking and chatting, the words that really need to be used are actually those hundreds of commonly used words. For example, the key figures that Chen Pingan carefully copied from the Yushan Bamboo Branch School, in addition to a few helpers from the outer sect Sykes lineage, the Masons of the Taiyu Mountain, there must also be the mining officer by Bo, Xia Huzan of Shulongfang and Liang Yuping of Jizu Mountain. Adding them together, it is estimated that there are all kinds of characters on the small 30th, but they really can be called the so-called basic of Lu Qin, only the Zhuji faction, and it is estimated that there will be no more than the number of hands. This kind of script, and identity, is it a monk? Has nothing to do with the level of the realm. However, Lu Qin always felt that Chen Pingan stayed on the side of Tsueyu Mountain, as if he wanted nothing else, and his intention was very deep. Of course, it wasn't through the Zhuji faction to stare at the trivial matter of Xingyang Mountain, so when Lu Qin decided to do a good deduction, at the Sanhuadan side, Chen Pingan might have relied on the band set by Fu Lu Yushuan. It may be some kind of instinct, grabbing a current one, pushing the boat with the current, and throwing a piece of Lu Chen's mind into the cage. It's not that Lu Chen can't forcibly break the restriction and get out of trouble, but in this way, he really wants to make a complete revenge with Chen Pingan. Lu Chen is never afraid of anyone, Lu Chen is only afraid of not himself. Lu Chen cultivates the Tao, and has little good and evil, which is completely opposite to the scene where the 2 lines of good and evil in Chen Pingan's heart were very close. Chen Pingan's mood, or cognition, if the heaven and the earth have not yet opened, and the Tao heart of Lu Qin is like the world is almost infinite, it can be said that the Tao is pure Jedi heaven in another sense. Chen Pingon said, "Don't force it, anyway, I will travel to the Middle Earth and Divine Continent in the future." Lu Qin smiled and said, "Your swordsmanship is mysterious, but it's much simpler than senior brother youth seeking 500 spiritual officials." Chen Pingon said, "Master Lu doesn't need to remind me of the gap with him, I know better than anyone else." Lu Qin wondered, "You haven't personally experienced brother Yes Taoism and swordsmanship, how dare you tell the difference?" Chen Pingon said, "Then treat me as bragging." Lu Qin took a sip of tea and chewed the tea leaves in his mouth. Chen Pingon said, "When the body is outside, in fact, there is a kind of mind in addition to the practice. After a long time of mountain climbing and practice, it is easy to forget the predecessor. Then stay at the foot of the mountain to see the scenery on the mountain." Lu Qin nodded, all habits themselves are a kind of self-inflicted forgetting. Chen Pingon raised the bowl, bumped with Lu Qin, and used tea instead of wine. Just saying the words of Zhang Jiaolu, the average mountain person can't say it. Chen Pingon smiled and said, "Since I was young, every time I went out to travel until novel. I had a little habit of counting the characters mentioned in different books. Among the top 10 characters, Zhang Jiaolu can be said to be the one who rides. Juechen, the 4th to 10th place, the total number is not as good as a Lu Qin." Lu Qin asked curiously, "What if you add the 3rd? Chen Pingon said, "It's not as good as Master Lu." Lu Qin asked again, "Add the 2nd one." "It's still not as good." Lu Qin praised, "It turns out that Pin Dao is so powerful." The young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown looked up at Luopao Mountain. "There is a family in Baiyunxing." A lotus flower on the crown of the road flickered, and the heart was drawn together. Lu Qin held the bowl in one hand, and tapped the table with his 2 fingers. "Don't you see the world is like a mural, the water is the paint, the mountains are the paper, the ghosts are walking all over the wall, the spring breeze is sassy and the sword is shining. The poor people have heard the ancient sayings passed down by the immortals, the gods are divided in the 4 worlds, the Shui Jing Palace has green tiles, colorful battles hold high peacock fans, goddesses dressed in baboon costumes, and golden whips drive unicorn horses. Wind, the Confucian temple on the left and the Wu temple on the right, there is still the Qinghuang temple in the middle, the Fuchuan in the mountain is full of brocade clothes, the aquarium is clear and the offering is sitting and it is cool, whoever bows to the heavens, the golden bell and the jade chime reflect the sound of the mountain. Chirin drives halfway back, pillow under the plum tree white bones, taste the clouds and mists at the bottom of the worry wall, lift up the mountain gate and go to the sky." At this moment, someone ran from the mountain and laughed loudly. "Master Lu, are you here to set up a stall again? The pretty girl who used to be in the small town with you and my brother, is now married as a woman. Come on, I'll lead the way. On the other side of the city, how many beautiful girls are there now? One is old and another is new, there are only a lot more than in the past." Lu Qin let out a snort. Hearing the voice, he just felt a big head. He was about to put oil on the soles of his feet, but the man reached out and grabbed his shoulders and said with more strength, "What are you running, old friends? Brothers are united, business is booming, when you with my light, I have made a lot of money." Lu Qin had to put his back on the bench, and said helplessly, "Brother Dofing, the family doesn't talk about the 2 sides, as long as you squatted next to the stall in the poor road, it was really no business, and it was almost blocking the way to make money. Ladies, they all came to the poor road one by one, but when they saw you, they all walked around the stall. Did the poor road say a word? Is it enough brotherly loyalty?" Jing Dofing smiled and said, "What's the point of mentioning the past?" Lu Qin nodded, tilted his shoulders, and complained, "It hurts." Chen Pingan got up with a smile. I don't think I understand what you guys are talking about and what you're talking about. Lu Chen was anxious. Don't, the three of us are all acquaintances, we can chat together if we want to chat. Chen Pingan sat down again and asked, Headmaster Lu has come to Howren this time, what is he busy with? Lu Chenchen smiled and said, if Chen Shan is busy with something, he can go first. Brother Dafeng will treat him here, that's enough. Chen Pingan thought for a while, are you looking for a certain monk? In fact, Fizu is looking for, Tonggishao is looking for, and Aquarius is also looking for such a potential cultivator. According to Cui Dongshan's speculation, it is the son of a Howren human woman and a cultivator of the wild demon tribe. Cui Dongshan wanted to find this person first, but it was in vain. Just like he wanted to find the little girl Yuan Shao later in the colorful world, he was destined to disappear. Although Chen Pingan was almost inexplicable, Lu Chen nodded and said worriedly, it's very troublesome, quite troublesome. In a sense, I've actually found it twice, but I haven't been able to catch it. As for why I can't catch it, just look at the sundial in the wild world. So the Confucian temple side also has a headache. This time Pindao came to help, and the Confucian temple did not stop it. Staying on Howren's side is just a hot potato. Yuli is not suitable, and he can't be imprisoned. After all, the other party has not made any mistakes at present, and it is not easy to let go. If it is allowed to develop, it will only survive and not destroy itself. The natural cultivator is born, and the preservation is to pick up money on the road. You can pick up Daoshu cheats on the last trip to the mountain. If you want to quietly let a big cultivator stare, as if waiting for the other party to make a mistake, and then kill them, isn't it still punishable by not teaching? With poetry, benevolence, righteousness and sages, who is willing to take over such a huge cause and effect? Even if someone is willing to take over such a mess, do they really think that they can change the trajectory and change the result? If the poor guess is not wrong, in the heart of that child, there was already a huge hostility towards the entire Howren world, such as seeing with his own eyes the indisputable, or even a good man's father, who was beheaded by the Howren cultivator, just because he took military exploits, regardless of indiscriminate he killed him. Even the child didn't have time to know that his father was a savage demon clan, and his mother was also affected. If the woman's appearance was any better, wouldn't those Howren cultivators not be individuals? Pindo's guess is only one of the possibilities. It's just sex. In fact, there can be countless worse situations and outcomes. His deep-rooted hostility to Howren world will, as the years go by and his ascent on the road of cultivation, make him gain more malice and savagery. The demons and monks who died here in the world, those pure malice, will continue to be passed on and superimposed on this monk in a strange way that is difficult to observe and trace, until one day, for example, when he joins the ranks, the Ascension realm will only reveal the truth, but by that time, he is probably already in the wild world, standing with Fei Ran and Shouchen. It is very likely that the two worlds almost collided this time. The guy's intention is only to let this child grow up quickly in a more hidden way. Li Xing leaves Howren world once every 10 years and goes to the outer world. This person will grow up quietly if he is lucky, and the realm won't climb too fast, so as not to reveal the truth. It's a good thing you didn't act impulsively. If the Sishiantai and Jilan office of the Liu family in Middle-earth were destroyed. That's all, it's just a waste of money for repairs, if the Liu family is destroyed. The Yinyang family's sky watchers and earth surveyors suffered heavy casualties due to a sword questioning, and there were only a few left. In addition, the head of the family, Lu Xin, was cut down, and the consequences would be unimaginable. Mr. Lu, now there is a pair of men and women, they belong to heaven and earth, the Taoism is pure and flawless, and the whole world is vast. It cannot be said that they are the only ones who can find the monk. There are still masters in the Confucian temple, but there are them without them, it is true, it is still very difficult the same. If the two of them met you, Mr. Mo, and Miss Sia that night, such as what is good? Isn't that a huge mess? You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.